High above the snow-draped castle, a painful, lingering cough echoes against the freezing winter sky. Terrified for her young daughter, Gretel gathers her heavy dress and sprints through the grand stone corridors, her heart pounding with sudden, overwhelming anxiety. Flinging the ornate bedroom door wide open, Gretel bursts into the room with frantic urgency, her trembling voice asking if her darling child is feeling unwell. Gazing toward the bed, her expression contorts with deep anguish as she breathlessly calls out Laviella's name. Sitting up in bed, little Laviella offers a sweet, reassuring smile, trying to soothe her mother by claiming she has only caught a mild cold. But Gretel immediately presses a gentle hand against the girl's flushed forehead, insisting she rest while going to fetch medicine for her fever. Overwhelmed by intense guilt, tears stream down Gretel's face as she bitterly blames herself for her daughter's fragile health. She wraps Laviella in a passionate, tearful embrace, holding her tightly, while the gentle child rests against her mother with a warm and comforting gaze. As Laviella rests softly in her mother's arms, a sudden shock of forgotten memory pierces her mind. Her bright blue eye snaps open in horror as a grim vision unfolds, a sinister guillotine beneath a blood-red sky, where her loving mother kneels weeping, destined for execution as a villainess. The strange dream she experienced last night suddenly becomes terrifyingly clear to her. In a past life far away, she was an ordinary high school student walking beneath bright city lights, constantly reading a web novel on her phone that foretold this exact tragic fate. In the web novel, Patrick Bryan was a remarkable commoner whose extraordinary feats on the battlefield earned him immense renown. Recognized for his valor, the king personally knighted him, elevating the brave young war hero to the prestigious title of Duke. Coveting the newly appointed Duke's rising status, the greedy Marquis d'Armouid immediately moved to exploit him. He proposed a strategic political alliance, offering his own daughter in marriage to firmly bind their two powerful noble houses together. Although their engagement was strictly a political arrangement, Gretel quickly surrendered her heart to her new fiancé. Looking into his gentle eyes as he held her in a tender embrace, she foolishly believed they could build a genuine, happy life together. Behind closed doors, her cruel father subjected her to relentless psychological abuse. The Marquis towered over his trembling, tear-streaked daughter, berating her for being pathetic and scheme that she must wrap her clueless husband around her finger before the princess stole him away. Her father's venomous warnings soon became a painful reality as Patrick grew increasingly distant. Gretel watched in silent agony as her husband shared cheerful smiles and quiet intimacy with the royal princess, completely shutting Gretel out of his world. Overwhelmed by paranoia and heartbreak, Gretel committed an atrocious crime by slipping poison into the princess's wineglass. When the cup shattered onto the floor, Patrick confronted her with cold contempt, leaving Gretel weeping bitterly on her knees as she faced her tragic judgment. With the villainess executed, the web novel concluded as a triumphant romantic fantasy, portraying the Duke and Princess as true soulmates who healed each other's scars in a beautiful story of poetic justice. Reading the novel's side story in her past life, she had uncovered a chilling secret hidden from the main plot. Gretel was never a heartless villainess by choice, but a desperate mother trying to protect her secret child, Laviella. Her abusive father, Marquis d'Armouid, had taken the innocent child hostage from birth, using her life as leverage to control Gretel like a pawn on a giant chessboard. Every tragic sin Gretel committed was done solely to save her daughter. Snapping back to the present, young Laviella coughs softly in her sick bed while looking into her mother's tearful face. Gretel presses a trembling hand against her daughter's forehead, her voice shaking with fear as she feels the girl's burning fever. Desperate to comfort her sick child, Gretel wraps Laviella securely in heavy blankets, promising to fetch medicine immediately. She urges her to rest and rushes frantically out of the room, leaving the little girl staring after her. Knowing she cannot afford to lie in bed, Laviella whispers a silent apology to her mother. The moment Gretel vanishes down the hall, The frail child creeps out of bed and peeks cautiously past the heavy wooden door frame. Driven by a desperate urge to test if her past memories are truly real, she wraps her cloak tight and sprints down the grand castle hallway. She pushes open the heavy entrance doors, braving the howling winter cold outside. Panting in the biting winter air, she pushes forward toward the estate's mailbox and pulls out the freshly delivered newspaper. With trembling hands, Laviella spreads the paper open, her wide blue eyes frantically searching the front page for proof. Her heart freezes in sheer disbelief as this newspaper article confirms her worst fears. The events predicted in the novel are already unfolding. Clutched in her trembling hands, the paper reveals the exact news of Patrick's rise. Realizing the terrifying execution awaiting her mother, Laviella vows with all her heart that she will alter fate and save Gretel. Panting in the bitter cold, she realizes their very first priority must be escaping Marquis d'Armuid's oppressive grasp. Gretel must never be allowed to meet Patrick, nor enter into that cursed political engagement. But as Laviella searches for a way out, a sudden desperate epiphany strikes her mind. What if her mother ends up with someone else entirely? If Gretel forms an alliance with another man, a shadowy, formidable figure powerful enough to stand up against the Marquis, they might finally break free from this tragic destiny. Before she can think any further, the howling winter wind carries the sudden sound of heavy boots crunching against the snow. Panicking, Laviella presses her cloak tight against her chin and quickly scrambles behind the frozen bushes, holding her breath to stay completely hidden. Two patrolling guards stroll past her hiding spot, grumbling bitterly about their miserable assignment. They casually mock the estate, calling it nothing more than a lonely prison built by the Marquis to lock away his daughter for foolishly falling in love with a commoner. The soldiers call Laviella a dying bastard, heartlessly wishing the frail child would perish soon so they can leave this frozen wasteland. Overhearing their vile cruelty from the bushes, Laviella's wide blue eyes glare with dark, burning fury. High above the snow, a red-haired knight named Paul steps forward and bluntly orders the patrolling guards to shut their mouths, declaring his ears feel filthy listening to their malice. As he confronts his fellow soldiers, Paul turns his head toward the frosted bushes, spotting little Laviella crouching silently and hiding. Infuriated by his defiance, the senior guard sneers contemptuously, mocking Paul as an unmannered commoner who foolishly feels kinship with the disgraced Lady Gretel. Refusing to tolerate any backtalk from a lower-class soldier, the guard violently strikes Paul across the face, sending him stumbling back in pain. Before the senior guard can utter another cruel taunt, a sharp rock hurtles through the freezing air and smashes directly into his cheek. Staggering backward from the sudden violent impact, the bleeding soldier clutches his forehead, looking around in utter shock and fury to see who dared strike him. Panting heavily in the bitter winter wind, frail little Laviella charges straight out from behind the snowy bushes, her face flushed red from her burning fever. Standing her ground with fierce determination, she screams at the top of her lungs, ordering the wicked guard to apologize to Paul and her mother immediately. Seething with humiliation, the wounded soldier loses his temper entirely and raises his arm to brutally strike the small girl. But the instant his hand swings down, Paul hurls himself forward, shielding Laviella beneath his own body and absorbing the harsh blow meant for her. Tucked safely against the knight's chest, Laviella looks up with wide, breathless eyes, overcome with emotion, as she realizes Paul risked himself to protect her honor and her mother's name. Standing resolute against the cold courtyard backdrop, young Laviella confronts the men without a single trace of fear. She raises her voice, demanding a full apology for the careless words spoken about her mother and the violence committed against Paul, while one guard desperately tries to keep the peace. Blood trickles down the wounded knight's face as he snarls in humiliation, bitterly warning her to remember her place. Driven by rage, he raises his arm to strike the young girl down. Laviella flinches and pulls back, helplessly bracing herself for the painful impact to come. Hurried footsteps slice through the snow just before a heavy blow echoes across the yard. But the strike never touches Laviella. Instead, her mother Gretel throws herself into harm's way, absorbing the violent slap and leaving the attacker staring in sudden, horrified disbelief at what he has done. Panic instantly erupts among the onlookers as the guards shout Lady Gretel's name in terror. Laviella cries out for her mother, her heart shattering as she watches her collapse into the snow. Gretel gently holds her reddened cheek, her steady expression revealing a quiet resolve despite the harsh pain. The guards grapple with the offending knight, harshly reminding him that he just laid hands on nobility. Laviella rushes to her side, tears welling as she touches the tender mark on her mother's face. Yet Gretel pulls her close, offering a warm smile and softly reassuring Libby that she is entirely fine. The atmosphere shifts entirely as Gretel turns her gaze upon Sir Royal, causing the knight to visibly flinch. Standing tall amidst the snow and holding her daughter close, she addresses him with quiet indignation, questioning how a guard assigned to protect her could dare act with such unbridled violence. With eyes full of sharp authority, Gretel demands an immediate answer, commanding absolute respect from everyone present. Laviella looks up at her mother in wide-eyed astonishment, completely mesmerized by the sudden strength in a voice she has never heard sound so powerful before. In young Laviella's memories, her mother was always a soft beacon of light, lovely bright and endlessly gentle. But standing here amidst the swirling winter snow, that familiar warmth completely gives way to a cold, majestic resolve as Gretel confronts the hostile guards. Hoping to regain control, Sir Royal angrily points his finger at Laviella, gesturing to his bloodied head while accusing her of lacking discipline for attacking a knight on duty. Gretel looks down at her daughter with quiet seriousness, asking whether she truly threw a stone without any cause. Holding her head high without a single trace of guilt, Laviella declares she can answer with complete confidence. Pointing right back at the guilty guard, she bravely exposes how Sir Royal complained about suffering in this cold territory because of them and uttered truly unspeakable insults. The instant Laviella reveals he even wished for her to die quickly, Gretel's eyes flash with terrifying anger. Sir Royal breaks into a nervous sweat, frantically raising his hands to claim it was all a simple misunderstanding. But Gretel steps into his space, her dark aura completely silencing his pleas. Commanding the knight to stand up straight, Gretel unleashes a sudden heavy slap that echoes loudly across the yard. The violent blow knocks the armored man off his feet into the snow, leaving the surrounding guards gasping in utter shock at her relentless display of fury. Laviella clutches her cloak in wide-eyed amazement as her mother steps forward, her reddened cheek still bearing the tender mark of Sir Royal's earlier blow. With unyielding nobility, Gretel reminds them all that even while confined to this northern corner, she remains a direct blood relative of their employer. Towering over the fallen soldier, Gretel looks down on him with immense disdain, warning that dismissing a mere knight like him would take no effort at all. Sir Royal winces in bitter humiliation, completely crushed beneath the overwhelming weight of her aristocratic authority. Stepping towards Sir Royal, Gretel grabs the abusive knight by his collar and pulls him close, her dark gaze flashing as her voice drops into a chilling whisper. While she can bear whatever harsh rumors people spread about her, she will never tolerate anyone uttering such vile cruelty where her precious daughter can hear. Casting the humiliated guard back into the snow, Gretel turns her cold gaze upon the terrified onlookers. With unyielding highborn authority, she orders them to inform the Marquis House to replace Sir Royal at once, sternly warning that any further insolence will carry severe consequences for them all. The instant the panicked guards drag their comrade away, Gretel's fierce demeanor melts into pure maternal concern as she turns to check on Laviella. But before they can retreat inside, the little girl's knees buckle, and she collapses onto the frozen ground, burning with a sudden, severe fever. Terrified by her child's collapse, Gretel calls out frantically for Paul to help carry her indoors, away from the bitter winter air. Slipping toward unconsciousness, young Laviella gazes up at her mother with a faint, peaceful smile, feeling deeply reassured by how wonderfully brave her mother was today. Inside the quiet warmth of the bedroom, Gretel sits tightly beside the bed, gently placing her trembling hand against Laviella's burning forehead. The alarming fever shows no sign of abating, severely worsened by the intense emotional shock and harsh cold her frail body endured outdoors. Driven by sheer desperation, Gretel begs Paul to call a doctor to examine the ailing child. But the loyal knight lowers his eyes in helpless apology, constrained by the Marquis's strict command that no outsiders are ever permitted to step foot on the isolated grounds. Promising to search the house for any remaining medicine that might lower the fever, Paul quietly takes his leave. Left alone in the dim room, Gretel staggers back in complete anguish and buries her face in her hands, weeping silent, heartbreaking tears over her child's suffering. Gretel's mind drifts back to the heartbreaking past that brought them to this frozen land. Having lived ignored by her noble family, she thought her father held no interest in her. But after she found true happiness with a commoner husband and gave birth to Laviella, her father cruelly murdered her love. Reeling in agony upon learning her husband was dead, Gretel listened in horror as her father mocked his memory and sneered at the baby's commoner blood. But when he threatened the child, Gretel confronted him with terrifying resolve, warning that the moment her baby died, she would end her own life. Calling her fierce vow utterly foolish, the Marquis agreed to leave the newborn untouched. Instead, he maliciously exiled them to a desolate northern corner, convinced that the harsh winter cold and relentless suffering would break her spirit, eventually forcing her to return on her own. Back in the dim bedroom, Gretel rests her head against the mattress, weeping in absolute silence. Though she never regretted cutting ties with her husband's murderer, a crushing guilt weighs on her heart, knowing her choice condemned her delicate daughter to grow up neglected inside this cold, wretched mansion. Tenderly pressing her palm against Laviella's burning cheek, Gretel sheds heart-wrenching tears of pure helplessness. Bound by her father's cruel ban that forbids any doctor from visiting, she can only hold her frail child close and whisper desperate apologies for failing to give her proper care. As night settles over the quiet room, young Laviella faintly stirs awake from her high fever. Looking down over the blanket, she discovers her mother collapsed asleep against the mattress, having stayed her bedside through the night. Seeing her like this, Laviella softly realizes just how exhausted her mother must be. Gazing down at her exhausted mother sleeping by the bed, young Laviella gently touches her face with deep affection. Filled with a quiet yet fierce resolve, the delicate child softly promises that she will protect her mother from any further pain. Across the dim room, the heavy door slowly creaks open as a shadowed figure silently watches through the narrow crack. Completely oblivious to the mysterious intruder, Laviella vows to secure her mother's happiness for as long as she lives. Deep in the quiet castle hallway, a young retainer trudges through the dark moonlight with a heavy sigh. He stares down in utter frustration at the tiny potion in his gloved hand, unable to believe that after scouring the entire tower, all he managed to find was a meager bottle of cheap fever medicine. The situation in the manor is dire. A young child is burning with a severe fever, yet the Marquis and his cruel retainers flatly refuse to allow a proper doctor inside. Instead, they callously demand that herbs be gathered from the fields, treating the child's desperate condition with complete contempt. Dread heavy in his chest, he hesitates right outside Lady Gretel's doorway, wondering how he can possibly deliver such terrible news. But as his hand reaches for the latch, quiet voices murmur from within. Peeking through the cracked door, he spots the little girl comforting her feverish mother, softly promising to protect her no matter what. Inside the dimly lit bedroom, little Laviella leans tenderly over her mother's bedside, whispering sweet assurances that she will bring her true happiness. Watching her innocent devotion from the shadows of the doorway, his heart warms with deep affection for the precious young lady. Her very next words freeze the blood in his veins as she calmly whispers that she will guard her mother until the day she dies. Overwhelmed by sudden panic, he throws the door wide open and bursts into the room, desperately demanding to know what she could possibly mean by speaking of death. Instead of flinching or startling at his sudden intrusion, the young girl turns toward him slowly. Her calm blue eyes meet his panicked gaze with a quiet, unbothered stillness that cuts right through the tense air. Behind that childlike appearance lies a secret no one in this household could ever fathom. Laviella remembers her past life, knowing with absolute clarity that the world she inhabits is a novel, and she already understands the cruel fate looming over her mother and herself. Staring into the shadows of the room, Laviella vividly recalls the tragic death awaiting her mother in the novel's original story. But as memories of her past life flood back, she confronts an even darker truth. Her own young body is rapidly failing, leaving her with very little time left to live. Horrified by her casual mention of dying, the retainer cries out in frantic disbelief, unable to grasp her sudden words. Yet Laviella remains unnervingly calm, knowing that once she passes away, the Marquis will deceive her grieving mother into becoming a villainess. Determined to rewrite her mother's fate, she vows to act before her own life ends. Gently hushing him so her feverish mother isn't wakened, she cuts through his panic by addressing him directly as Paul. The retainer flinches in startled surprise under her sharp, piercing gaze, realizing with a cold chill that the unyielding focus in her blue eyes belongs to someone far older than a child. Unable to look away, Paul stares at her in utter bewilderment, struggling to comprehend how this serene, commanding girl could possibly be the sweet young lady he has watched over. Breaking the tense silence, Laviella asks him for a monumental favor, speaking with a heavy seriousness that belies her small frame. She warns him that the Marquise will soon arrive at the castle, intent on dragging both her and her helpless mother away to the capital. When she softly asks if he will help them escape, Paul gasps in total shock. Laviella closes her eyes with quiet regret, admitting how awful it is to ask him to risk his life, yet confessing that he is the only ally she has left to turn to. Paul immediately sets his own safety aside, promising to assist them without hesitation. But a dark gloom settles over him as he voices a terrifying truth. Even if they manage to escape the castle grounds, tonight they cannot run forever from the Marquis' sinister and far-reaching grasp. When Paul frantically asks where they could possibly flee to escape the Marquis's reach, Laviella softly beckons him closer. Without a single shred of hesitation, she whispers her chosen destination directly into his ear, revealing that she has already carefully mapped out every detail of their daring escape. Paul reels back in utter disbelief, completely horrified by the terrifyingly dangerous location she just named. Yet as he stares at her in sheer shock, Laviella gazes back with a quiet, unyielding resolve, softly asking if he will risk everything to stand by her side and help them break free. Paul's mind drifts back to his early days as a young recruit, enduring grueling morning drills under the bright sun in the castle courtyard. As the commander finally calls an end to the training and the soldiers disperse, Paul wipes away his sweat, exhausted from the relentless physical strain. A fellow guard slings a friendly arm around Paul's shoulders, warmly inviting him to join the squad to grab some lunch. But Paul politely declines the invitation with a subtle smile, offering a vague excuse that he has urgent personal business to take care of on his own. His friend voices a cautious warning, letting him know that the squad leader and his hostile goons are looking for an excuse to teach him a harsh lesson. Paul simply chuckles softly, offering a gentle nod of gratitude for the warning before turning away. As Paul sets his wooden sword onto the rack, envious whispers ring out behind his back, scorning him as a commoner sucking up to fallen nobles. But Paul pays no mind to their bitter malice, knowing his deep loyalty has nothing to do with status, power, or personal gain. He vividly recalls the heartless cruelty of the castle guards whenever sickness plagued Lady Gretel and her young daughter. When the child burned with a severe fever, the cold-hearted captain spat with contempt, callously ordering everyone to leave her alone without any medical aid or mercy. Deep in his memories, Paul vividly recalls burning with an excruciating fever as a helpless young recruit, feeling completely abandoned to die alone by the castle's heartless guards. But just as his strength gave out, Lady Gretel and her tiny daughter knelt tenderly by his bedside, rescuing him from the brink of death. Nursing him back to full health with gentle compassion and sweet smiles, they treated him with a human dignity he had never known before. Stepping back out into the sunlit castle grounds fully recovered, Paul's heart brimmed with profound gratitude, forever binding his devotion to the noble mother and child. Fixing his gaze with unshakable resolve, Paul silently vows to risk everything to protect their lives, no matter how dangerous the path ahead. Determined to execute Laviella's escape plan, he strides up to his commander's office to request an overnight pass under the quiet cover of evening. Meanwhile, back in her secluded bedroom, little Laviella sits thoughtfully at her desk, softly spinning her quill as she reflects on Paul's utter shock at her daring request. She can't help but recall his bewildered, panicked expression when she whispered the terrifying destination into his ear. Crossing her arms in serious deliberation, she acknowledges that escaping the Marquis's sinister grip would be completely impossible without Paul's loyal assistance. But her quiet reflections are violently shattered as loud thuds shake the estate, followed by the heavy, ominous clatter of armored boots marching straight toward her door. The bedroom door is thrown wide open as dark-cloaked intruders stride boldly into the room, surrounding the young girl's bed. Laviella turns around in sudden alarm, staring up from her writing desk as the heavy armored figures loom over her, quietly confirming if she is indeed the child they sought. A scarred, imposing commander steps into the light, his dark and terrifying aura casting a heavy shadow over the entire room. As he callously labels her as Lady Gretel's illegitimate child, Laviella's breath catches in her throat, her blue eyes widening in sheer paralyzing horror. An ominous knight breaches the doorway, gazing upon the young girl resting in her room. Surrounded by imposing guards, little Levy looks back in silent shock, wondering who this terrifying visitor could be. Gretel rushes inside, furiously demanding to know why Gilbert has barged into her home. Unmoved by his cold greeting, she confronts him face to face, scolding the knight for invading her private quarters like a ruthless intruder. Gilbert's gaze turns dark as he reveals his true purpose. The Marquis himself sent these knights to capture both Gretel and her daughter, delivering news that leaves the mother pale with sudden dread and horror. Urging her to cooperate willingly rather than face restraint, Gilbert commands his men to move in. As a shadowy knight steps toward the bed, Gretel screams out in desperation for her child. Levy cries out for her mother in absolute terror. Having remembered the original novel, she knows the Marquis wasn't meant to drag them away until the end of winter. But as a heavy hand reaches down to seize her, she realizes the timeline has shattered, forcing events forward far sooner than expected. Surrounded by armed knights, a lone carriage cuts through the snow-covered forest, carrying them toward the fearsome Marquis's estate. Inside the cold, rattling carriage, Gretel holds her daughter close, checking on her with deep concern. Burning up with fever and coughing into her hand, Levy gazes up in distress, realizing that this dark reality is completely shifting away from the future she remembered. In the original novel, the male lead, Patrick, received a proposal from Marquis d'Armouid right after winning the war. After endless deliberation, it was only near the end of winter that Patrick finally accepted the Marquis's offer, formalizing their strategic alliance, Mike. Yet now, trapped in this carriage, Livy realizes events are accelerating far faster than anticipated. Struggling to breathe through her violent coughs, she despairs over whether her own awareness of the future disrupted the timeline, leaving her escape plans completely ruined. Desperate to protect her suffering daughter, Gretel shouts for the carriage to stop and steps straight out into the freezing snow. Facing the stoic Gilbert on horseback, she pleadingly insists that they halt their journey, refusing to let Levy endure any more painful rattling. However, Gilbert remains grim and skeptical, reminding her of their morning rest stop and harshly questioning if the child is feigning illness. Gretel gapes in horror at his cruel insinuation, angrily shouting back at the men who forced a sick child onto the road. Amidst their tense argument, the heavy thud of hooves cuts through the forest as a young knight arrives at a full gallop. Gasping with a mixture of shock and profound relief, Gretel immediately calls out Paul's name as he rears his horse to a sudden stop. Dismounting in haste, Paul apologizes for his late arrival and holds up a small bottle of medicine intended for young Levi. But before he can even step toward the carriage, an ominous sword is unsheathed and leveled directly at his throat. Gretel steps in frantically, shouting for Gilbert to hold his blade, and explaining that Paul is a guard knight who rode out to fetch medicine for little Levi. Showing respect despite the tense standoff, Paul bows low before the knight commander, offering the bottle he secured from a nearby village. Gilbert coldly demands that they take the bottle and send Paul back immediately. But Gretel refuses to comply, fiercely shouting back that Paul must remain with them. Without a single maid to assist, she insists on keeping someone who will not dismiss her daughter's genuine suffering as a lie. Clenching her trembling fist, Gretel warns that if he continues ignoring her child's health and putting Levi in danger, she will refrain from holding back. She stares down the knight, reminding him that while her father commanded them to be brought in, he never requested corpses. Tears of anger fill Gretel's eyes as Gilbert reluctantly relents to her bold stance. However, his harsh tone darkens as he turns to leave, sternly warning her of severe consequences if she harbors even the slightest thought of betrayal during their trip. Gilbert commands Paul to join their riding formation. As the company prepares to move out once more, Paul immediately hurries over to check on Lady Gretel's safety, swiftly handing her the remedy so she can care for her sick daughter. Re-entering the carriage, Gretel cradles feverish little Levi in her arms, gently tilting the medicine bottle to her daughter's lips while Paul assists with a cloth. Encouraging Levi to stay awake, take her medicine, and rest, the devoted mother holds her child tightly against the cold journey. As the feverish fog begins to lift, little Levi weakly opens her eyes inside the dark carriage. Gretel gazes at Paul with profound relief, deeply thankful that he returned with life-saving medicine, before turning her complete, agonizing devotion back to comforting her fragile daughter. Outside, the heavy carriage presses steadily onward through the freezing night forest, rattling against the uneven road while a single lantern casts a warm, flickering light over the mother and child. Stirring softly on her mother's lap, Levi lets out a quiet groan as her senses slowly return. Overjoyed to see her daughter awake, Gretel immediately pulls the girl into a warm, desperate embrace, tearfully blaming herself for putting Levi through such terrifying ordeal. Glancing out the carriage window at the armored escort riding alongside them, Gretel explains that these knights were sent by Levi's grandfather to bring them to the capital. Tenderly cupping her child's face, she promises to handle every danger herself, so Levi can focus only on recovering. Though Gretel always tried to shield her daughter from harsh truths, Levi gazes up with deep awareness. She vividly recalls the tragic story, remembering the overwhelming hardships, endless pain, and helpless tears her mother suffered under the cold tyranny of the Marquise. Determined to protect her mother from that grim destiny, Levi wraps her tiny arms tightly around Gretel's neck. As Gretel holds her close, the weak young girl whispers that she hid a small secret present inside her coat pocket. Reaching into the pocket, Gretel carefully pulls out a delicately folded yellow paper crane. Smiling brightly with newfound hope, little Levi gestures forward, gently encouraging her mother to unfold the paper bird and discover the secret hidden inside. Gretel carefully unfolds the yellow paper crane, marveling at the hidden message written within. Levi's handwritten note gently reminds her mother that she is at her most beautiful whenever she smiles, and that seeing her happy is her favorite thing in the whole world. Overwhelmed by the unexpected sweetness, Gu gasps in soft surprise as tears of profound love fill her eyes. Seeing her daughter's bright, giggling smile, Gretel's heart melts completely as she pulls Levi into a tight embrace. She showers her cheek with affectionate kisses, marveling at how incredibly precious her child is. Gazing lovingly into Levi's eyes, Gretel marvels that her little girl managed to preserve this comforting gift, despite all the fear and commotion of their sudden capture. Drying her tear-stained face, Gretel gently promises to hold on to her smile, just as Levi asked. Though Levi teasingly points out her mother's tears, she wraps her small arms tightly around Gretel's neck to offer comfort. But resting over her mother's shoulder, Levi's eyes grow intensely focused, silently vowing that she will rewrite their tragic fate and ensure her mother never has a reason to weep again. Gazing out through the cold glass of the moving carriage, Levi looks past the curtains at the escort surrounding them. Riding steadily alongside in the freezing night, Paul catches her look and offers a subtle, reassuring nod, reassuring the young girl that she and her mother are not entirely alone on the dark road ahead. As a sudden snowstorm begins to sweep through the dark woods, the commander orders the escort party to halt. Pushing ahead through the freezing, howling wind is far too dangerous, so the knights prepare to set up camp for the night. The men pitch tents in the deep snow and gather around a crackling fire, sharing hot stew and bread. Amidst the harsh winter chill, the peaceful camp offers a brief moment of warmth and rest for the weary travelers. Inside the cozy carriage, Gretel watches young Levi holding her bowl of stew and gently encourages her to eat more to stay healthy. Levi offers a sweet, sheepish smile, promising her mother that she will take bigger bites next time. After Levi dutifully swallows her medicine, Gretel tenderly wraps a thick cloak around her shoulders. She softly reassures her daughter that a good night's rest will help her feel much better, just as a polite knock sounds against the carriage door. Paul opens the door with a bright, friendly smile, bringing a tray of steaming hot drinks for them both. Gretel thanks him warmly for his kindness, and the cheerful knight laughs, admitting that he enjoyed a very hearty meal himself. Paul steps inside to offer them steaming cups of herbal tea, kindly mentioning that he prepared the warm brew to help ward off the harsh winter cold. Gretel accepts the tray with warm, genuine gratitude, while young Levi quietly sits back, watching the cheerful knight with an unusually intense and thoughtful gaze. As Paul bids them a peaceful night and closes the carriage door, Gretel takes a soothing sip, delighted by the rich taste of honey in her cup. Seeing her mother so relaxed in the soft candlelight, Levi breaks the cozy silence, timidly asking if she might receive her birthday present a few months early. Surprised by the sudden request, Gretel happily agrees, fondly asking if her daughter wishes for a new book, a soft doll, or another handmade ribbon for her hair. But as Gretel reaches out to touch her cloak, Levi gently fidgets with her ribbon, her initial hesitation giving way to profound resolve. Looking intently into her mother's eyes, Levi solemnly asks if Gretel remembers that she never makes promises she cannot keep. Gretel quietly nods in agreement, her smile fading as she senses an uncharacteristic seriousness and heavy weight behind her young daughter's steady gaze. Holding tightly onto Gretel's dress, Levi makes her strange and heart-wrenching request, asking her mother to grant her birthday wish by doing exactly as she asks without question, and trusting her completely no matter what unfolds. Gretel stares back in utter shock, deeply unsettled by her daughter's cryptic words. Levi casts her gaze downward, her small hands clutching her cloak in deep anxiety. She realizes how sudden and alarming her request must sound, yet the painful thought of her mother being utterly devastated by her sudden disappearance compels her to prepare Gretel, even if only in secret. Pondering the inevitable separation ahead, Levi silently begs her mother to stay strong through the mystery. Even if they are forced apart for a time, she desperately hopes Gretel will hold on to unwavering faith, endure the coming days without distress, and wait patiently for her return. Overwhelmed by her young daughter's uncharacteristic seriousness, Gretel takes a quiet breath to process this heavy request before softly offering her consent. Hearing her mother agree to trust her completely without demanding an immediate explanation, Levi gasps in utter astonishment, her wide blue eyes sparkling with surprise. Gretel sighs affectionately, warmly reassuring Levi that she completely trusts her and believes she must have a valid reason for her mysterious request. Reaching out to gently cup her daughter's face, Gretel offers her unconditional faith, bringing overwhelming emotion and tears to young Levi's eyes. Reminded of how deeply her mother has always loved and protected her through every hardship, Levi quickly wipes away her falling tears with her sleeve. Filled with profound love and gratitude, she softly thanks her mother, pleading with her to hold on and wait just a little while longer. As Gretel pulls her beloved daughter into a warm, protective embrace, Levi buries her face tightly against her mother's chest, silently promising to save her mother's life at any cost. Gretel gently insists that Levi must explain everything to her later, and Levi earnestly promises that she will. With Gretel's heartfelt words of absolute trust echoing softly, an eerie stillness settles over the frozen forest outside. Surrounding the campsite, every single knight in the escort party lies unconscious upon the cold snow, allowing a solitary figure to march quietly toward the carriage door. The heavy carriage door creaks open into the howling winter wind, and Paul softly calls out for young Lady Laviella. Standing inside with her thick winter cloak wrapped securely around her shoulders, Levi turns toward the knight with unwavering determination, quietly announcing that she is completely ready to go. Beside her, Gretel reposes in a deep, peaceful slumber on the carriage bench, entirely unaware of her daughter's secret plan. Confirming that the sleeping draught Paul provided worked successfully on everyone in the camp, Levi steps down into the snow, embarking on her secret journey to save her mother. Paul reassures Levi that the mild sleeping powder he prepared will wear off safely within the hour, urging them to move quickly while they have the chance. Yet he hesitatingly wonders if a stronger dosage might have put everyone into a deeper slumber, allowing them to take Lady Gretel along. Levi softly explains that keeping the escort party unconscious in the frozen forest for too long would leave them vulnerable to wild beasts, and she refuses to let anyone be harmed. Besides, she firmly reminds Paul of his own words. Simply running away without a real plan is completely meaningless. Levi reflects that even if she and her mother managed to flee together now, the ruthless Marquis would relentlessly hunt them down. Her beloved mother would spend years suffering on the run just to protect a sickly child, carrying a heavy burden that Levi is determined to spare her from. Refusing to settle for a momentary escape, Levi boldly declares that her ultimate goal is to break free from the Marquise completely and secure eternal happiness for her mother. Stunned by such profound foresight, Paul chuckles softly, marveling that it is hard to believe she is merely 9 years old. Paul leads out a fine black horse, the knight commander's own steed, reassuring Levi that despite its owner's fierce nature, the animal is gentle enough for their journey. With a calm, supportive smile, he comfortably settles her onto the saddle before them, ready to take their first secret step. Leaving the entire escort party unconscious around the quiet, snowy campsite, Paul instructs Levi to hold on tight as he spurs the horse forward. The powerful steed surges into a rapid gallop, carrying them away through the dark, wind-swept forest. Clutching Paul's cloak tightly as tears stream down her face, Levi silently begs her mother for forgiveness for leaving her behind. She desperately prays that Gretel will hold on through the pain of separation, trusting in the secret promise that they will eventually be reunited. Deep in the frozen wilderness, a knight pushes his horse to its limit through a bitter snowstorm, cradling a tearful child safely against his chest. Tears stream down her cold cheeks as he whispers words of comfort, begging her to hold on just a little longer. He promises they will soon be reunited with her mother once they reach Shalom. The mountain path leading to the capital is fraught with danger. Yet reaching Shalom remains their best hope of escape. As a bustling trade hub filled with merchants and travelers, the town will allow them to discreetly board a carriage bound for the outskirts of the capital without leaving any trace behind for their pursuers. Once near the capital, The young girl knows she must find her way to the grand estate of Duke Esperanza. Carrying memories of her past life and knowing the tragedy that lies ahead, she is determined to offer the formidable Duke a contract, hoping to buy safety and freedom for her mother from her tyrannical grandfather. Her desperate planning is abruptly shattered when a chilling howl echoes through the dark trees. A pack of predatory snow wolves has picked up their scent and is gaining ground rapidly. The knight shouts in alarm, pressing the horse into a wild sprint, while warning the frightened girl to grip the reins tightly. The ravenous beasts close in with frightening speed, their crimson eyes flashing through the night as they snap perilously close to the horse's legs. The rider grits his teeth, realizing they cannot outrun the pack, just as a massive wolf springs high into the air, lunging directly at them with open jaws. With swift, practiced skill, the knight draws his blade and slashes across the lunging monster mid-air. Blood splatters against the snowy backdrop as his glowing sword cuts the beast down, all while his left arm holds the little girl wrapped tightly against his chest to keep her safe from harm. Desperately kicking his heels into the horse's flanks, the knight begs the exhausted steed to run faster through the freezing wind. Right behind them, the relentless pack of wild snow wolves bounds across the snow, their heavy paws kicking up frost as they rapidly close the distance. Just as the knight prepares to fight off his pursuers, his eyes widen in sharp alarm at the terrain ahead. Cut directly into the snow-covered forest path is the abrupt, deadly edge of a steep cliff dropping straight down into a dark precipice. With a sharp whinny, the black horse rears back wildly, skidding to a desperate stop right at the cliff's slippery edge. The rider grits his teeth in frustration, realizing there is no room to turn the horse around, just as the monstrous white wolves close in growling. Cold sweat streaks down the knight's face as grim panic settles over him. Snug within his cloak, the small girl looks around in sheer fear, realizing they are completely trapped. Her eyes widen as she whispers to herself how critical their situation has become. Trapped against the sheer cliff edge, rider and child are completely surrounded in the snow-dusted woods. The ravenous snow wolves prowl in a tight circle around the horse's hooves, their glowing red eyes locked on their prey as they prepare to leap. Meanwhile, back in the snow-covered forest camp, an urgent shout startles Commander Gilbert awake in his tent. Rising from his cot with a scarred, stern expression, he demands to know what happened, only for his kneeling subordinate to confess that the entire night order was secretly drugged with sleeping pills during the night. Commander Gilbert reacts with stunned fury, demanding how the Night Watch could allow such a catastrophe to unfold. The messenger bows his head in distress, explaining that even the sentries on guard duty were knocked out cold and are only just now groggily coming to. Realizing that a dangerous traitor must be behind the sudden drug night, Commander Gilbert snaps into action, his mind racing with suspicion. He storms across the frozen campsite straight toward the main carriage, his eyes narrowing with dark intensity as his shadow darkens the quiet cabin interior, ready to confront Lady Gretel. Waking groggily from her heavy drug-induced slumber, Lady Gretel rubs her eyes and calls out in confusion, completely unaware of the chaos outside. Her heart leaps into her throat when Gilbert violently slams his armored fist right beside her head, looming over her with dark fury as he sternly warns her against trying any foolish tricks. Demanding to know where she secretly hid the young child, Gilbert aggressively corners her inside the carriage, but Gretel stares back in total, unfeigned bewilderment. Sudden dread takes hold of her as she frantically cries out Levy's name, her eyes darting in horror toward the vacant couch where only a rumpled blanket remains. Overwhelmed by maternal panic, Gretel desperately lunges forward and grabs Gilbert by his heavy cloak, frantically demanding to know what he has done with her precious daughter. Watching her tremble uncontrollably as tears overflow her wide, frightened eyes, Gilbert realizes with cold clarity that her desperation is genuine and she had no part in the child's disappearance. Before Gilbert can process the situation further, A breathless subordinate knight rushes up to report that Paul is missing from Camp's well. Realizing the rogue knight betrayed them and helped the girl escape, Gilbert barks firm orders to mobilize a tracking unit immediately before the relentless blizzard buries every trace of their footsteps. Left alone in the carriage while the search party fans out into the bitter cold, Gretel refuses to sit helplessly while her young child is lost in the wilderness. As she frantically throws back her cloak to venture into the storm, a folded letter slips out from her blankets and drops quietly onto the wooden floor. Gretel unfolds the letter left behind in the carriage, her eyes widening as she reads Levy's quiet apology for leaving without a word. In the handwritten note, the child begs her mother to trust her and wait without asking questions. Reaching the end of the letter, Gretel gasps in shock as she reads Levy's solemn promise to return safely. Clutching the paper to her chest, panic takes hold of her as she realizes her little daughter has ventured out into the freezing wilderness alone. Outside in the bitter snowstorm, Commander Gilbert barks orders for his knights to mount up and begin tracking the runaway child. Hearing his command, Gretel rushes into the snowstorm, passionately insisting that she be allowed to join the search party. When Gilbert warns her not to waste precious time, Gretel steps directly in front of his horse, boldly declaring he will have to ride right over her before she leaves her daughter behind. Faced with her unyielding resolve, Gilbert reluctantly commands his men to fetch her a mount. Mounting up alongside the knights, Gretel rides aggressively into the darkness as the blizzard howls around them. But her heart drops when distant wolf howls pierce the night air, sending a chill of pure dread through her as she tightens her grip on the reins. Picturing her fragile child lost somewhere in the freezing woods, Gretel closes her eyes in distress. She questions what Paul could possibly be thinking, traveling through wolf territory in the dead of night, desperately praying that Levy remains unhurt. Suddenly, Gilbert calls out a sharp order to halt, reining his steed in as they reach a key spot along the trail. He commands the entire unit to dismount immediately, and Gretel steps down into the heavy snow to search the area on foot. Searching through the deep snow on foot, Lady Gretel looks around in confusion, wondering why Commander Gilbert ordered a sudden halt, but her breath catches in sheer terror when she looks down, spotting fresh bloodstains dark against the frozen ground. A woman freezes in her tracks, her eyes filled with shock at the dark blood scattered across the snow. Clasping her hands against her chest in dread, she covers her mouth in horror, her trembling voice barely able to call out Levy's name as overwhelming panic grips her heart. Armored knights halt in the forest as one points out a slain wolf lying motionless in the snow. The scarred commander notes the clear sword wounds on its hide, wondering if wolves overtook the escaping party. He immediately orders his men to search the entire area and follow the blood trail. Overwhelmed by heartbreak, the mother falls to her knees directly beside the frozen bloodstains in the dark snow. Cold wind blows past her trembling shoulders while she shakes her head in complete denial, weeping softly as she desperately whispers to herself that there is no way Laviella is dead. Stepping back 1 hour earlier, young Laviella senses immediate danger unfolding within the dark forest. Clinging tightly to her protector aboard their horse, her wide eyes fill with alarm as a pack of vicious white wolves suddenly emerges from the snowy trees, completely surrounding their escape route on every side. Without warning, a wild wolf lunges forward with open jaws, snapping violently near the young girl's feet. Her guardian acts without hesitation, swinging his sword to strike the beast back with a sharp shout, keeping his arm pulled tightly around Laviella to shield her from the fierce attack. Pulling the frightened child close against his chest, he urgently asks if she is all right, finding small comfort when she quietly confirms she is fine. Yet as his eyes glance sideways in desperate calculation, dread settles in. The growling wolves advance, completely cutting off their only path of retreat. A sheer cliff drops off into the snowy darkness ahead, cutting off their escape route with no time to search for a bridge. Hardening his gaze, the young man makes a swift, desperate decision. He pulls Laviella securely inside his heavy cloak, telling her to hold on tight as danger presses in. Surrounded on all sides by the aggressive pack, he decides their only way out is to charge directly through the wolves toward the abyss. Though startled by the terrifying drop ahead, Laviella grits her teeth in resolute determination, realizing this perilous leap is their only chance to survive. As the horse readies itself, he reaches out to gently stroke the stallion's neck, whispering a quiet plea of trust. Gripping the leather reins with unwavering, firm resolve, he braces himself and the young child for the frantic dash ahead. With a sharp shout, he spurs the warhorse into an explosive gallop. The black stallion surges forward with tremendous speed, catching the pack completely off guard as it thunders right past the snapping jaws of the white wolves. Though the wolves race frantically behind them in the snow, the stallion hurtles straight toward the brink of the precipice. With the dark chasm rushing up ahead, he places every ounce of faith in the commander's prized horse, praying they can leap the gap. Snarling viciously with glowing red eyes, the predatory pack of white wolves lunges toward them from every direction. The young guardian holds little Laviella securely against his chest, tucking her deep inside his thick winter cloak to shield her from the biting cold and snapping jaws. Gripping the leather reins with absolute resolve, he spurs the brave warhorse forward to break through their vicious ring. Plunging forward, the stallion plants its hooves firmly into the icy snow and leaps straight off the cliff's edge, soaring dramatically through the frozen night sky high above the chasm. Left stranded at the precipice, the growling wolves watch helplessly. Tucked safely in her protector's arms, young Laviella closes her tear-filled blue eyes, frantically praying they survive this terrifying jump to reach her mother. Returning to the present search, urgent calls ring out through the snowy woods as the squad of armored knights follows the bloodied trail straight to the brink of the high cliff. Surveying the dark gorge below, a knight grimly informs the commander that the tracks end abruptly at the drop, leaving them to fear the wolves drove the escaping party directly over the perilous edge. Overhearing the knight's heartbreaking report, Lady Gretel gasps in utter shock before dismounting and rushing frantically toward the edge of the precipice. Grief and terror instantly transform into fierce denial as tears fill her eyes. Overwhelmed by panic, she screams at the knights to continue searching every inch, passionately insisting there is no way her precious daughter could have died in such a terrible manner. The scarred commander visibly trembles with anxiety, softly pleading with Lady Gretel to stay back, while promising his men will continue searching the forest below. Yet grief drives her beyond all reason. Struggling violently against the heavy gauntlets of the knights holding her back, she shouts in anguish that she must inspect the cliff herself, refusing to accept that her child could be gone. Standing at the snowy precipice, the knights urge caution, warning that descending into the steep, dark gorge during such heavy snowfall could take several days. Staring grimly into the vast abyss, the commander insists that even if the young girl perished in the fall, they must search relentlessly to recover her remains. Behind his cold resolve lies desperate calculation. Knowing the Marquis relies entirely on the child as a hostage to control Lady Gretel, losing her would ruin everything. Panicking at the thought, the commander loudly orders his men to comb every inch of the surrounding forest while he escorts Gretel back to the capital. As harsh orders echo through the snowy woods to ready the carriage, Lady Gretel crumbles into quiet anguish. Tears stream down her face as her mind replaying the horrible thought of her daughter falling into the icy abyss, leaving her trembling in profound sorrow and shock. In the midst of her despair, a faint voice softly echoes in her heart, whispering for her mother. Gretel gasps and abruptly spins around in the snow, her tear-filled eyes widening as a sudden unspoken intuition cuts through her overwhelming grief. Glancing past the surrounding knights toward the icy foliage near the cliff's brink, her eyes catch a familiar pattern tangled in the branches. Her chest tightens as she instantly recognizes the distinct plaid ribbon, a precious token she had lovingly handcrafted for Laviella. Warm memories of tying the ribbon onto her smiling daughter rush back, bringing a sudden, thrilling realization. Spotting the ribbon snagged on the far side of the precipice and recalling Laviella's quiet plea for trust, Gretel realizes her clever child survived the leap and is truly alive. Overwhelmed by intense relief, Gretel swiftly clasps a hand over her trembling mouth to conceal her gasp. As the commander rides up to ask if something is wrong, she carefully guards her silent joy, keeping her daughter's secret escape safe from watchful eyes. When the commander sternly orders her to leave the search to his knights and return to the capital, Lady Gretel quietly agrees. Grasping her cloak to hide her trembling hands, she bows her head and steps back, carefully concealing her secret hope from their watchful eyes. Tears stream down her pale face, yet her heart no longer aches with despair. Looking out over the frozen landscape, she softly whispers a prayer into the biting wind, holding tightly to the unshakable belief that her precious Laviella will return safely to her arms. Meanwhile, far beyond the snow-swept forest, the devoted knight safely carries young Laviella toward the towering gates of a distant haven. Wrapped securely inside their heavy winter cloaks, they press forward into the golden light, leaving the dangerous wilderness behind. Peering out from under her thick hood, Laviella's tear-stained face lights up with a radiant smile. Clasping her small hands together in deep relief and gratitude, the courageous little girl gasps with joy, knowing they have finally made it to safety. A bitter blanket of snow falls quietly over the distant town of Shalom as the weary travelers finally step into its shadowy refuge. Catching her breath in the freezing air, she knows their relentless pursuers must already be searching every road behind them, leaving them with no time to drop their guard. Her mind drifts back to the hazardous trail behind them, where she carefully tied a ribbon past the cliff edge before fleeing. She desperately hopes her grieving mother discovers that tiny token of survival, praying it gives her the strength to hold on to hope rather than believing her child is gone forever. Her quiet reflection is broken when Paul suddenly winces in agony, leaning heavily against the cold alley wall as pain overwhelms him. Seeing him stumble under the strain, she urgently begs him to stop and treat his bleeding injuries, but he firmly insists that every passing second counts for their survival. Looking at his severe injuries, her chest tightens with deep remorse as memories of their violent escape flash before her eyes. When their horse lost its footing during the blizzard, Paul selflessly wrapped his arms around her and took the brutal impact of the fall onto his own body, just to keep her unharmed. Attempting to soothe her visible distress, Paul forces a faint, reassuring smile and insists his wrapped bandages will heal soon enough. Yet behind his calm words lies a grim urgency, as he reminds her that lingering in the cold alleyways will only invite discovery. He explains that releasing the commander's horse was only a temporary distraction, since the trained animal will eventually wander back and reveal their direction. Realizing the constant danger he faces for her sake, she lowers her head sorrowfully, asking him to hold on through the pain just a little longer. She blinks in sudden surprise when Paul turns his attention away from his own suffering to gently ask if she is all right. Even while bleeding and exhausted, his primary concern remains her fragile frame, worried that the violence of their fall and the endless fleeing without rest have taken a heavy toll on her. Softly breaking the heavy silence, she looks up at Paul with a gentle smile and insists she is perfectly fine. Deep inside, her resolve is held together by the memory of her mother and the solemn vow she made to return home safe and sound. Seeing her smile through the freezing cold, Paul feels a deep pang of admiration and heartache. Though she is just a young child enduring terrifying danger, she faces every hardship with quiet bravery without uttering a single complaint. Her face brightens when she catches sight of merchant carriages gathering nearby in the snowy town square. Sensing a chance for their escape, Paul urges her to stay concealed in the shadows while he moves ahead to inspect their route. As workmen hustle to load heavy wooden barrels onto the waiting wagons, Paul realizes this is their best opportunity. They decide to secretly board one of the merchant carriages, heading directly toward the imperial capital, hoping the dark cargo will shield them from their pursuers. Days later, at the heavily guarded east gate of the imperial capital, border sentries strictly monitor every wagon entering the city. Southern merchants who traveled all the way through Shalom present their papers, exchanging polite pleasantries as they wait for their cargo to be cleared. Without warning, the calm line is shattered when heavily armored riders rudely shove the waiting merchants aside. Demanding immediate priority, the ruthless riders force their way to the front of the queue without showing a shred of courtesy. When the confused guard hesitates, the leading knight barks out a harsh command, declaring that they serve the household of Marquis d'Armuid. Claiming to carry an urgent report that cannot wait, he orders the terrified gatekeepers to clear the way instantly. Overwhelmed by the authority of the Marquis's name, the trembling sentries quickly bow out of the way and yield the gate. Watching the riders gallop past, one merchant scoffs under his breath at their thug-like behavior. But his companion pales in terror, desperately hushing him and warning that the brutal d'Armuid family would strike commoners dead for the slightest offense. Before they can recover, a stern voice suddenly calls out from the gloom, asking if the carriage belongs to them. When the scar-faced commander sternly points out fresh bloodstains smeared across the wooden back of the wagon, the young merchant freezes in terror. Stammering anxiously, he bows repeatedly before the rider and insists he has no idea why blood is on his trade carriage, desperately trying to dispel the guard's sudden suspicion. Unconvinced by the merchant's nervous excuses, the commander coldly orders his men to search the cargo inside immediately. Ignoring the trader's frantic pleas, the heavily armored knights step forward, pulling aside the heavy canvas curtain to peer into the dark wagon interior packed with wooden crates. Climbing aboard with heavy metallic footsteps, the knight recklessly kicks aside the merchandise, knocking potatoes from their sacks to roll across the wooden floor. Finding nothing suspicious in the open, the armored guard turns his gaze further into the gloom, zeroing in on the large wooden boxes stacked deep in the back. Crouched in the narrow, dark space behind those very crates, Paul holds the young lady tightly against his chest while she covers her mouth in terror. Sweating profusely in the stifling gloom, Paul recognizes these searchers as their relentless pursuers and panics at having run directly into their path. With the guard stepping closer, Paul tightens his grip on his concealed dagger, silently resolving to ambush the knight the instant he appears. He is fully prepared to draw all their attention and sacrifice himself if it gives the young lady a chance to escape. But a sudden muffled yelp inside the wagon cuts his plan short. Inside the gloomy wagon, the knight recoils in surprise and disgust, stammering to his commander that a massive dead rat carcass is lying among the crates. Outside, the merchant instantly brightens with relief, eagerly calling out to the riders that the dead rodent must be the work of Nero. Before the commander can ask who Nero is, the merchant proudly holds up a round, chubby brown cat, cheerfully explaining that his pet is a master at hunting rats to protect his goods. The cat lets out a loud meow, unwittingly providing the merchant with the perfect excuse to explain away the bloodstains. Satisfied by the merchant's explanation, the scarred commander scoffs and orders his riders to move out. As the heavy footsteps retreat, the young trader sighs in relief while hugging his cat, and inside the dark cargo hold, Paul finally lowers his blade, immensely relieved that their desperate gamble paid off. Gently checking on the trembling girl, Paul assures her that their pursuers are truly gone. With the immediate danger behind them, they quietly slip away from the carriage and follow their map through the night, searching for the key figure who holds the power to reshape their future. Looming grandly under the starry sky, the impressive estate of Duke Esperanza comes into view behind towering iron gates. Knowing this is the one sanctuary that can alter her mother's tragic fate, the young girl gazes up at the magnificent mansion in awe. A bittersweet smile crosses her flush, heat-stricken face as she urges Paul to hurry inside. But just as she reaches for hope, the relentless fever and physical exhaustion finally overcome her frail body, causing her to collapse heavily onto the cold stone path as Paul yells out in alarm. Even as darkness threatens to pull her under, her gaze remains pinned to the moonlit estate, desperate to reach the man inside. High above in a dimly lit room, a mysterious, dark-haired figure stands quietly by the rose-framed window, oblivious to the child shivering at his gates. Whispers of scandal echo through the darkness, framing her mother as a wicked villainess who poisoned the princess out of jealousy. Stripped of her noble status, the broken woman kneels helplessly, while accusatory hands point from every direction, leaving her disgraced and utterly condemned by high society. Refusing to let the harsh crowd condemn her mother, the young girl fearlessly steps forward, throwing her arms wide to shield her. Tears spill down her cheeks as she passionately defends her, remembering the priceless warmth of the affectionate hugs they shared in happier times. Cradling her mother's tear-stained cheek with trembling hands, she whispers reassuringly that this miserable future will never come to pass. Now that she remembers the original novel, she resolves to shatter this cruel destiny to pieces, begging her mother not to cry as she vows to protect them. Gasping for breath, the small child snaps awake in bed, tears streaming down her pale face as the lingering terror of the nightmare recedes. She sits up amidst soft bedding, looking around the vast, dimly lit bedroom with an overwhelming sense of confusion. Clutching the heavy blanket close to her chest, she softly wonders where she has been brought, her wide eyes searching the room until the heavy door creaks open. A tall, immaculate woman clad in a formal dark dress steps inside, her rigid posture commanding immediate attention. Uncertain of her surroundings, the young girl timidly stammers to ask for the stranger's identity. Maintaining an unwavering composure with her eyes briefly closed, the formally introduces herself as Odile, the head maid appointed specifically to attend to the young lady's needs. Without missing a beat, Odile instructs her to wash up and partake in a light meal, offering to assist her with changing clothes shortly after. She calmly delivers the crucial announcement that Duke Esperanza is already waiting to see her, signaling the start of an unexpected encounter. Stepping out into the sweeping luxury of Duke Esperanza's grand estate, Rebe takes a quiet moment to absorb her magnificent surroundings. Though she had collapsed almost immediately after securing their desperate deal, she feels an overwhelming wave of relief at having made it safely inside the ducal manor. Clad in crisp, high-quality garments, she dutifully follows headmaid Odile through the quiet sunlit hallways, her hand resting keys against her chest in breathless wonder. As Odile guides her past attentive rows of uniformed servants and beneath towering vaulted arches, Rebe is utterly captivated by the manor's magnificent interior. Every elegant sculpture and ornate hallway carries a formidable, imposing presence that leaves her amazed by the sheer scale of ducal nobility. But as she gazes around at the lavish surroundings, Odile suddenly pauses in her tracks and offers a formal, unexpected apology. Clearing her throat with subtle embarrassment, the headmaid politely explains that because the only young child residing in the estate is a boy, they had no choice but to outfit her in male attire. Rebe's bright blue eyes widen as she instantly realizes Odile must be referring to young Lucien. Shaking away her initial surprise, she enthusiastically reassures the maid that she does not mind the outfit at all. Rebe bows politely and bubbles over with heartfelt gratitude, thanking Odile for the beautiful clothes and for ensuring medical care was given to her injured companion, Paul. Flustered by such pure, radiant warmth, the stern headmaid turns her head with a faint blush, clearing her throat to insist she was merely following the Duke's direct orders before cheerfully inviting Rebe to head inside. After knocking gently on the ornate entrance, Odile pushes open the heavy double doors and ushers Rebe into the sunlight-drenched study. Standing quietly beside the window is the ruler of the Esperanza household, an illustrious noble family holding absolute power that does not yield even to the imperial throne. Turning to face his young visitor, Duke Jack Esperanza looks down with a commanding presence and sharp, crimson eyes. Sensing the oppressive aura filling the quiet room, Rebe instantly realizes Duke Jack Esperanza is completely different from any adult she has ever encountered. Standing before his imposing figure, the terrifying gaze of his sharp, crimson eyes makes the surrounding air feel overwhelmingly heavy. Clenching her hands tightly together, Rebe desperately forces herself to regain her composure amidst the pressure. She reminds herself of her ultimate goal, that she came to this grand estate specifically to propose a crucial deal, and she absolutely cannot afford to look weak or falter before such a powerful noble. A faint smile touches the Duke's lips as he observes her brave demeanor, noting that it has been a very long time since a child did not immediately burst into tears in his terrifying presence. He promptly orders head maid Odile to secure the doors and ensure absolute privacy before gesturing for Rebe to take a seat. Settling onto the plush sofa, Rebe is caught entirely off guard by the sight of colorful sweet roll cakes arranged neatly on the table. The Duke quietly explains he had the dessert prepared because he was told children enjoy sweet treats, causing a startled Rebe to flusteredly promise she will enjoy every bite. As she savoringly eats the delicious pastry, Rebe reflects on the Duke's true character as revealed in the original novel. Though he projects a strictly formidable and cool-headed presence to the rest of the world, he is actually an extraordinarily meticulous and considerate man who pays attention to the smallest details. Taking a sip of his tea, the Duke suddenly shifts the tone of the meeting, asking if they are ready to begin their proper discussion. Rebe's eyes widen in sheer shock as he casually sees right through her mask, identifying her as the hidden young lady of the Marquis House of Diarmuid. Recognizing that it is futile to try to deceive such a remarkably keen nobleman, Rebe gently places her teacup down and abandons all pretense. Gathering her courage, she lifts her head high and openly confirms her true identity as Laviella, the daughter of Gretel Diarmuid. Hearing Gretel's name, Duke Esperanza raises an eyebrow in mild surprise, recalling that the young noblewoman was believed to be unmarried. He casually dismisses her private affairs as none of his concern before turning his sharp gaze back to Rebe to ask why a hidden noble daughter has come to seek him out. Abandoning all hesitation, Rebe boldly cuts straight to the heart of her visit. She states she is well aware the Duke has no intention of marrying, before revealing her secret knowledge of young Lucian, identifying him as the very successor the Duke quietly intends to pass his esteemed title down to. The Duke's expression darkens with quiet intrigue. He wonders aloud how a child could possess such private information, questioning whether he would truly grant the ducal title to a mere collateral descendant. But Rebe remains unfazed, looking him dead in the eye as she asserts that Lucian is anything but ordinary. Confidently extending her hand, Rebe promises she holds the secret to ensuring Lucian inherits the duchy without a single complication. In exchange, she delivers her ultimate request, demanding the Duke propose marriage to her mother Gretel Diarmuid, passionately insisting that only this contract can fulfill both of their deepest wishes. Offered a marriage contract that promises to grant his heart's desire, Duke Jack Esperanza is caught completely off guard. He gazes in shocked silence, trying to comprehend how this young girl standing before him could possess such sensitive knowledge. She speaks with unflinching confidence about Lucent, an heir whose identity was guarded with absolute secrecy. Even the most senior elders of the Esperanza family were kept entirely in the dark, leaving Jack stunned by her impossible foresight. His thoughts drift back 10 years, to a dark period when the House of Esperanza stood on the precipice of total ruin. A fierce political struggle raged as the Empress and Crown Prince sought to dismantle their faction, targeting Jack directly. Like pieces maneuvered across a treacherous chessboard, false evidence was systematically planted against him. The imperial plot aimed not merely to weaken Jack's influence, but to frame his entire noble house for high treason. In the dark hours of that crisis, Jack's loyal aide Victor Floyd examined the fabricated documents. Realizing the evidence targeted the Esperanza house rather than the Duke personally, Victor prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice. As his sworn brother and aide, Victor insisted on taking full responsibility as a rogue subordinate who planned the treason alone. He stood resolute in his decision, choosing to shield Jack from destruction regardless of the consequences. Despite Jack's anguished pleas, Victor went to his death carrying the bitter stigma of a traitor. In the present moment, Jack closes his eyes against the painful memory, forever tethered to the tragic price of his family's survival. In the quiet darkness of his memories, Jack recalled his sole remaining act of atonement, taking in Victor's only son, Lucian, and raising him under absolute secrecy. He had sworn to shield the boy from the imperial court's deadly reach, patiently grooming him until the day he could safely inherit the entire dukedom of Esperanza. His ultimate hope had been to give Lucian the strength to reclaim his father's stolen honor and exact revenge against their conspirators. Yet as Jack unconsciously clenched his hand, a deep sense of unease took hold. He could scarcely comprehend how Laviella, a child who had never set eyes on the boy, could possess such guarded knowledge. Completely unfazed by his intense scrutiny, Levy calmly articulated the precise logic behind her contract marriage proposal. She pointed out that a duke could not leave the seat of duchess vacant indefinitely, as allowing the position to remain open would only invite relentless pressure and manipulative schemes from the persistent family elders. On the other hand, entering into a genuine noble marriage presented a dangerous conflict of interest. Whomever he chose as duchess would inevitably prioritize her own bloodline, scheming to pass the house's power and vast fortune to her own children, while discarding any secret successor Jack brought into the household. Levy urged him to see that her arrangement was entirely different, a pure exchange of mutual benefit. She exposed how her mother was locked away in the North Tower like a captive bird, held hostage by Marquis d'Arsmuid's insatiable thirst for power. By taking her mother as duchess, Jack could exploit the Marquis while sheltering them. Resting safely under the Duke's overwhelming influence, Levy and her mother would slowly build the leverage necessary to reclaim their independence. In return for his protection, her mother would readily provide the Duchess's formal consent required by law, permitting Jack to adopt Lucian as his official heir and pass down the family legacy. Jack listened intently but raised a crucial hurdle, warning that the rigid family elders would surely object to bringing an unknown child into the direct line of succession. Yet Levy merely smiled with unwavering assurance, leaving the Duke baffled as she declared that overcoming the elders was a task she would personally handle. Levy calmly articulates her intricate strategy step by step to the Duke. First, the new Duchess will adopt Levy under the noble pretext of supporting an orphan. Trapped by this clever maneuver, the rigid family elders will have no choice but to accept Lucian's adoption as the official heir, if only to keep a duchess tied to House d'Armuid from gaining unchecked power over the Esperanza dukedom. Jack gazes at her in shocked silence, his mind racing as he tries to comprehend how a young child could so effortlessly outline such a sophisticated political trap. When he asks whether these brilliant calculations were masterminded by her mother, Lady Gretel, Levy looks him straight in the eye and unflinchingly declares that every single thought is entirely her own, leaving the Duke caught between sheer disbelief and quiet amusement. His mind drifts back to the moment she first arrived at his estate, recalling how she evaded dangerous pursuers and traveled across vast distances just to stand before him with urgent information. As he looks upon her composed, unwavering stance, Jack comes to a profound realization that this is no ordinary child standing in his study, but a cunning strategist looking far ahead into the future. Softening his sharp demeanor, Jack gently tells her that she may withdraw for the evening, reassuring her that the night is deep and she must be exhausted from her long journey. He notes there is no need to rush her contract proposal, leaving Levy gasping in subtle surprise at his unexpected gentleness as he promises to give her his final decision soon. As a tranquil atmosphere settles over the tea table in the Duke's study, the narrative shifts far across the imperial capital to the grand estate of Marquis d'Armuid, where dark political schemes are already taking root. In the courtyard outside the mansion, heavily armored guards forcefully haul a defiant Lady Gretel from her carriage. Though Levy's mother struggles fiercely against their grasp and demands to be released, the scarred Marquis, standing nearby, remains completely cold and heartless, brusquely ordering his men to drag the young lady away and lock her inside a spare room. While Gretel is locked away under heavy guard, Marquis Kenneth d'Armuid stands inside his private study to confront his subordinate. Cold and ruthless, the Marquis sternly demands an immediate explanation for how his men could lose sight of a mere child. The cloaked assassin bows low in apology, explaining that he pursued the girl to the edge of the capital, where she likely fell off a cliff. Unmoved by the deadly height, the Marquis fixes him with a terrifying glare and orders him to retrieve her body without delay. Stroking his chin in dark deliberation, Marquis d'Armuid warns that a girl like her might still be alive. He insists that even if she perished, her corpse could remain useful for his political schemes, commanding his terrified henchmen to search until he sees the body with his own eyes. Before the henchmen can depart, an aide hurriedly enters the study to present an urgent message. The Marquis takes the paper and scans its contents, his brow furrowing in instant disbelief as the alarming news sinks in. The secret missive brings unsettling news concerning Duke Jack Esperanza, leaving the Marquis deeply unnerved. Marked with a prominent wax seal, the written report threatens to disrupt all of his carefully laid plans, setting the stage for a dangerous confrontation between rival noble houses. Sitting at a quiet table with a warm cup of tea, Laviella lets a soft, contented sigh. For the first time in a long while, her heart feels entirely at ease. Looking around her lavish new quarters, she can hardly believe this comfortable reality. From the serene peacefulness to the elegant, tailored dresses arranged gracefully in her bedroom. Yet beneath her relief, a lingering sense of disbelief remains. She remembers standing before Duke Esperanza, boldly exposing his most dangerous secret. She fully anticipated harsh threats or cold suspicion in return. Instead, he welcomed her into his estate with overwhelming luxury and warmth, leaving her wondering why he is being so unexpectedly generous. A sudden knock at the door gently draws her back to the present moment. The head maid steps inside, delivering news Laviella has been anxiously waiting to hear. Sir Paul, the loyal knight who risked everything to protect her, has finally regained consciousness in the infirmary and is asking for her. Overjoyed, Laviella instantly leaps up from her seat, eager to rush to his side. She beams at the head maid with pure, glowing gratitude, thanking her with such genuine warmth that the normally stern woman is completely overcome. Clutching her chest in sheer adoration, the head maid gladly leads the young lady down the corridor. However, the scene awaiting them inside the infirmary is far from peaceful. Furniture lies scattered across the floor in complete disarray as Paul frantically fights off the staff. Bandaged and trembling with exhaustion, he brandishes a wooden chair like a shield, fiercely demanding to see Lady Laviella right this instant. The panicked doctor desperately tries to calm him down, warning that such extreme strain will only worsen his critical injuries. But Paul's eyes burn with desperate intensity. Sweat drips down his face as he pants heavily, entirely consumed by terror and unable to rest while her fate remains uncertain. His mind races back to his last foggy memory of carrying Laviella through the night to meet Duke Esperanza before collapsing. Terrifying doubts gnaw at him. What if the Duke refused to help them? He dreads the terrible possibility that Laviella was handed right back to her cruel grandfather, leaving her trapped in danger once again. Haunted by terrifying memories of the Marquis' cruelty, Sir Paul clutches his head in profound anguish. He blames himself entirely for losing consciousness during their escape and leaving his beloved young master unprotected. Trembling with overwhelming guilt and exhaustion, he dreads that Duke Esperanza may have betrayed them. Determined to break past the guards by force, Paul's anger vanishes instantly as small arms wrap tightly around his waist. Lovely clings to him in relief before looking up with fierce indignance, scolding her loyal knight for causing a scene and acting rudely toward the kindly doctor who saved him. Stepping into the room, the head maid commands the space with cool authority, sternly scolding both the unruly knight and the nervous doctor for failing to show proper decorum before the young lady. Thoroughly intimidated, both men snap to rigid attention, while she calmly asks what caused such a loud commotion. Scratching his head nervously, the doctor explains that the moment Paul woke up, he panicked upon finding Laviella missing from his side. When the staff tried enforcing the Duke's strict orders to keep him in bed, the frantic knight raised a wooden chair as a weapon, throwing the entire infirmary into chaos. Softening her expression, the head maid acknowledges that despite his reckless nature, Paul is a knight of rare and devoted loyalty, offering her genuine blessing for their safe reunion. Radiant relief washes over Laviella and Paul as they clasp hands, beaming with heartfelt warmth and joy at being together again. Calling out to the physician, Laviella catches him off guard as she and Paul suddenly bow deeply together to offer their sincere thanks and apologies. Utterly flustered by such humbling respect from noble house guests, the doctor frantically waves his hands, insisting a commoner has no right to receive an apology. With a bright, affectionate smile, Laviella gently explains that showing gratitude for compassionate medical treatment is only natural, while apologizing for Paul's reckless outburst. Standing beside her, a sheepish and thoroughly embarrassed Paul blushes, bowing his head to stammer out a humble, earnest apology of his own. Warmly brushing off the chaotic scene, the physician offers a gentle smile, urging both Sir Paul and Laviella to simply forget the misunderstanding and focus on recovery. Noticing Laviella's fragile appearance, he kindly insists on prescribing her daily restorative medicine to rebuild her depleted stamina, catching the young lady completely off guard. A wave of lingering grief washes over Laviella as painful memories of her terminal fate surface. Knowing her frail body is destined to steadily weaken until she dies regardless of treatment, she gazes down with a sorrowful, resigned smile, quietly believing that consuming such valuable medicine would ultimately be nothing more than a wasteful effort. Before she can speak, the quiet entrance of a stranger interrupts the room. A dark-haired boy wearing delicate spectacles and clutches a heavy book steps inside to deliver a report. Spotting guests gathered in the infirmary, he pauses abruptly, offering a brief, courteous apology before bowing to excuse himself from the room. Laviella finds herself instantly spellbound, unable to tear her gaze away from the handsome boy. A profound, mysterious sense of recognition washes over her, making her feel as though they share an unspoken past. The sudden realization strikes her like a sharp shock, causing her eyes to widen in sheer astonishment. The truth instantly clicks in her mind. This reserved young boy is Lucien, the Duke's hidden heir. Recalling her knowledge of the original novel, she remembers that he is destined to become a powerful figure who will eventually aid the male lead in overthrowing the crown prince, yet here he is standing before her. Stating that it would be inappropriate to discuss business in front of guests, Lucien offers a polite bow and quietly turns to depart. Overcome by impulse and desperate not to let such a crucial story figure slip away, Laviella reflexively reaches out her hand and desperately calls out for him to wait. Noticing her startled reaction, the doctor gently steps in to clarify that the boy is his apprentice studying under his care. He explains that Lucien is remarkably intelligent, earning full sponsorship from the Duke's household, but remains extremely shy and severe about cleanliness, driving him to constantly distance himself from others. As the physician gently asks Lady Laviella to be understanding of the boy's reserved and distant behavior, she is already moving. Driven by an overwhelming impulse to reach him, she turns on her heel and dashes out of the infirmary, leaving Sir Paul calling after her in utter confusion. Calling back that she will return in just a moment, Laviella rushes down the grand, sunlit corridor. She panics internally, wondering if Duke Esperanza has already informed Lucien about the secret plan she brought to him during their contract negotiations. If their agreement unfolds as planned, Laviella will serve as the prominent public heir of House Esperanza. Even though she intends to depart peacefully with her mother upon reaching adulthood, she fears the current arrangement will make Lucien feel deeply betrayed by his father. Spotting the young boy standing isolated in the courtyard below, Laviella's heart aches at the thought that he might view her as an intruder stealing his rightful place in the family. Pausing at the terrace edge, she catches her breath in a flurry of emotion. Desperately calling out his name, her voice echoes across the courtyard. Halting his steps in the gentle breeze, Lucien slowly turns back, adjusting his spectacles to lock eyes with her in a quiet moment of silent intensity. Calling out Lucien's name beside the tranquil courtyard fountain, Laviella steps gracefully through the sunlit garden greenery to approach him. Surprised by the sudden appearance of an unfamiliar young girl in his private space, Lucien pauses over the dark book in his hand, adjusting his delicate chain-link glasses while asking directly who she is. Pressing a hand over her heart with a bright, welcoming smile, she introduces herself as Laviella. She explains that since they are bound to see a lot of each other from now on, she wished to introduce herself properly. Though a sudden wave of quiet uncertainty causes her blue eyes to widen as her words trail off. Silently harboring the tender hope that he will not end up despising her, Laviella quickly shakes off her momentary vulnerability. Reclaiming her cheerful composure, she tells him it was a true pleasure meeting today, offers a polite apology for holding him up, and turns on her heel to quietly take her leave. Before she can take another step away, a white-gloved hand swiftly reaches out and catches her wrist, pulling her back. Asking her to wait just a moment, Lucien halts her departure in mid-motion, leaving Laviella wide-eyed and thoroughly astonished by his sudden, unhesitating physical grasp under the shimmering garden sunlight. Looking up into his cool, composed expression, Laviella feels her mind race with sudden questions. She knows Lucien is said to suffer from severe mysophobia and completely despises touching other people, yet his gloved hand remains firmly clasped around her arm without showing even the slightest hint of hesitation or distress. The anxious voice of Paul, calling out across the garden courtyard, suddenly breaks the lingering tension between them. Grasping the opportunity to make her escape, Laviella stammers a quick farewell as Lucien slowly opens his gloved fingers, allowing her to pull away and run off toward Paul while he stands alone, quietly watching her depart. As Lucien stands alone watching Laviella hurry away into the courtyard, a dark, turbulent aura suddenly surges violently around him. Wincing from a sharp wave of internal discomfort, he tightly clutches his chest with his gloved hand, silently enduring the heavy, ominous affliction that threatens to break his composure. Later that evening, the scene shifts to the grand dining hall where Laviella sits down to share dinner with the Duke. Gazing over the elaborate tables spread with deep gratitude, she offers a polite smile and shyly admits that she has never tasted such a lavish feast in her entire life. Observing her barely touched plate, the Duke kindly notes that she has eaten almost nothing despite her glowing praise. Deeply concerned by her frail physique, he insists she try something lighter for dessert and orders the butler to place a delicate custard pudding directly in front of her. Unfamiliar with such fine sweets, Laviella gazes curiously at the unfamiliar dish before taking a hesitant first bite. The moment the creamy custard melts on her tongue, her blue eyes light up in absolute wonder, completely enchanted by a simple pleasure she had never been allowed to taste before. Seeing her genuine delight brings a gentle smile to the Duke's face, yet a heavy sense of pity lingers behind his expression. He quietly reflects on how tragic it is that a marquis's daughter was locked away in a cold north tower, deprived of even basic childhood comforts. Shifting the conversation to serious business, the Duke reaches into his jacket and pulls out a formal sealed envelope. Laviella reacts with sudden shock, leaning forward in astonishment, as he reveals that the letter is an official invitation sent directly from Marquis d'Armouid himself. Holding the envelope, the Duke explains that the Marquis' estate maintained remarkably tight security, making it difficult to uncover their true situation from afar. To probe their intentions, he personally dispatched his trusted aide with a letter carefully designed to test how the Marquis would react. The Duke explains that while his aide was only permitted to linger at the estate's entrance for a brief moment, his remarkably sharp ears gathered vital news. Despite the tight security surrounding the estate, he managed to uncover two critical pieces of information. First, the aide confirmed that the knights deployed to the north have finally returned to the Marquis's estate. More ominously, they were accompanied by a young woman tightly concealed beneath a heavy hood, keeping her hidden from sight as they arrived. Upon arrival, she was immediately taken away and locked deep within the manor's strict confinement. Realizing that this helpless captive is her beloved mother, Laviella's blue eyes widen in sheer horror as the grim reality of her mother's suffering strikes her. Concluding his report, the Duke reveals that the Marquis has formally invited him to the estate. Looking across the dining table with a calm yet intense gaze, he directly tells Laviella that the time has come to choose between allying with the Marquis or trusting her. Though momentarily stunned by his sharp ultimatum, Laviella quickly reclaims her composure and stands her ground. Looking back with steady determination, she tells the Duke he already knows the answer, as her mother and she remain his only genuine options. She reminds him that any other high-born noblewoman would inevitably covet the duchy's immense power for her own family line, whereas a duchess who harbors absolutely no desire to claim the heir's position is no one else but her gentle mother. The Duke admits her logic makes sense, yet he candidly questions whether this entire situation might simply be a cunning trick orchestrated by Marquis d'Armouid. Fully understanding his deep suspicion, Laviella unhesitatingly offers to travel to the sacred temple and swear a binding oath. Pressing her hand firmly over her heart, Laviella passionately wagers her very life on the sacred promise that her mother will never covet Esperanza and will only ever serve to assist the Duke, desperately hoping her complete sincerity will finally move him. Gazing down into her steadfast blue eyes, the Duke lets out a heavy sigh of quiet astonishment. He finds it truly remarkable that a mere 9-year-old child could speak so casually of wagering her own life. Thoroughly moved by her fierce conviction, he gives his final word, officially agreeing to trust her and proceed with the contract marriage. When the Duke declares he will inform the Marquis of his intent to marry Lady Gretel, a radiant smile lights up Laviella's face. Yet as the initial thrill settles, her sharp mind begins working quickly. Realizing events are moving much faster than in the original story, she worries the greedy Marquis may have already proposed an engagement to someone else. Bringing her concerns to the table, Laviella urges the Duke to look into any secret arrangements the Marquis might be considering. She then outlines her plan to hide at a nearby orphanage, while the Marquis frequents the ducal residence, ensuring she remains completely unseen and out of danger. The Duke listens carefully, thoroughly impressed by her clever precaution. She enthusiastically details her adoption strategy, explaining that returning from an orphanage after the wedding will provide the perfect cover. Not only will it keep suspicion at bay, but it will also give the Duke an ideal excuse to adopt Lucien as well, cheekily claiming he was simply captivated by an angelic child like herself. Seeing the Duke's sweat drop and stifle a chuckle at her bold self-praise, Laviella folds her arms with a pout and tells him he might as well laugh out loud. Giving in to the absurd charm of the moment, the Duke breaks his usual stern composure and bursts into warm, hearty laughter that echoes through the room. Later that evening, beneath the bright moonlight, Lucien perches silently on a high windowsill with a heavy tome open in his lap. A dark, ominous purple haze surges quietly around him, fluttering like dark butterflies in the night, until he narrows his cool gaze and abruptly snaps the book shut in the quiet darkness. Sitting across the elegant dining table, Laviella playfully reassures the Duke that her mother will not be interested in a man like him. The Duke chuckles softly in response, amused that he has been rejected before even meeting the lady. Delighted by her subtle payback for his earlier teasing, Laviella offers a bright, radiant smile. High above, in a dimly lit library window, young Lucian sits alone, silently watching the warm scene unfold below. As a dark magic butterfly flutters around his hand, he observes them having a pleasant time together, quietly recognizing that the young girl seems to have no idea how little time she has left to live. Placing his hand firmly against the glass frame, Lucian coldly tells the dark entity to be quiet. Yet the spirit flutters near his shoulder, reminding him that he saw the truth as well. The eerie, shadowy silhouette of a cursed soul hovering around the child like a heavy, dark aura. Lucian knew such rare curses existed, but standing before one in real life was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Remembering her clearly, she appeared heartbreakingly fragile, as if she could break at any moment, with blue eyes carrying a deep resignation, far too weary for someone so young. When he had instinctively reached out and gripped her wrist back then, a murky, damp presence surged through him for the very first time in his life. It left him shuddering in silent horror, wondering just how much death was festering beneath the surface of that tiny, fragile body. In that quiet moment, she had gently placed her hand against her chest, offering a sweet smile as she introduced herself as Laviella. Then, looking directly at him with a bright, welcoming expression, her clear voice had softly uttered his name, Lucian. Hearing his own name fall so tenderly from her lips startles Lucian to his very core. The sudden realization completely shatters his cold, guarded composure, leaving his eyes wide with pure, unfiltered shock as he turns to meet her gaze. High inside the library, the dark butterfly flutters around Lucian, mockingly asking if he is feeling sorry for the fragile young girl below or secretly considering using his power to heal her. Lucian scoffs at the suggestion, asking if he looks insane. He sharply reminds the entity that if word of his forbidden ability ever got out, he would be torn apart and sold off piece by piece. Driven by harsh self-preservation, he tightly grips the dark butterfly in his fist, crushing its shadowy form. The persistent entity calls him a nasty piece of work, taunting that no matter what he attempts, he will never be able to rid himself of its presence, reminding him that the absolute power of a god cannot be undone. The glowing spectral wings loom over him, refusing to yield to his hostility. Weary of the spirit's relentless prodding, Lucian angrily tells it to hurry up and disappear if it only intends to irritate him. As the butterfly scatters into glowing embers and fades away, it murmurs a final warning that avoiding the problem won't solve anything for the cursed child, nor for him. Left standing alone in the dim room, Lucian falls into a grim, unsettled silence. The quiet moment is interrupted when an attendant opens the library door, respectfully reporting that the Duke wishes to see him. Putting away his dark frustration, Lucian carefully places his round glasses back onto his face. With his voice restored to its calm and polite tone, he replies that he will head over immediately. As day breaks over the magnificent estate, sunlight bathes the grand facade, yet a heavy and anxious shadow lingers within the private living quarters. In her room, Laviella's mother sits on the sofa with a pained expression, curtly telling her maid to leave her alone. Kneeling anxiously with a tray of food, the maid begs her lady to take a few bites, pointing out that she skipped dinner the night before. Panicked, the servant tearfully explains that if she refuses her meals again today, the master has declared that every servant will be severely punished. Gretel's silent anguish summons painful memories of her ruthless father, the Marquis. Reliving a dark confrontation from her past, she remembers being forced to her prayers before him as he smugly declared it was time she repaid his generosity. When he coldly announced his intention to marry her off into a respectable noble family, Gretel stared back in complete, horrified disbelief. Furious at his hypocritical claim, Gretel confronted him for stealing her freedom and locking her in a tower. With her young daughter missing, she raged that he was a heartless monster for forcing an arranged marriage at such a terrible time. Yet her desperate pleas meant nothing to her unyielding father. Facing her tearful defiance with cold indifference, the Marquis commanded his butler to lock her away and ensure she was properly groomed to appear presentable on her wedding day. Returning to the present day, Gretel sits drowning in melancholy as she agonizingly wonders where her child could be. She desperately clings to the memory of Laviella's final note, which urged her mother to stay healthy until her promised return. Burdened by the crushing silence, since that day, Gretel breaks down into helpless sobs while her distressed servant kneels beside her. Their quiet grief is shattered when senior attendants enter the room with a stern demeanor, announcing they have arrived to help Lady Gretel get ready. They inform her that her prospective groom will be arriving at the estate shortly, and by the Marquis's explicit command, she is required to dress up and greet him. Outraged that her father is enforcing his old tyranny once more, Gretel fiercely refuses to obey. Stepping closer to quiet her refusal, the maid asks for a brief moment before whispering a sinister directive directly from the Marquis. He warned that if Gretel ever wants to hear news about her daughter's whereabouts, she has no choice but to comply. Realizing her precious child is being used as helpless leverage against her, Gretel's eyes widen in sheer horror as she realizes she is completely trapped. Cornered without a single alternative, Gretel softly surrenders, whispering her agreement to comply with her father's demands. Relieved by her quiet submission, the senior attendants waste no time and immediately begin dressing her and styling her hair to meet the Marquis's strict expectations. Adorned in an exquisite green gown paired with delicate lace and pearls, Gretel sits perfectly styled for her suitor's arrival. Yet behind her immaculate presentation, her weary purple eyes remain completely hollow, crushed under the heavy weight of forced obedience. The attendant respectfully asks her to wait quietly in the parlor before leaving her alone in the room. Sitting in the heavy silence, Gretel's chest tightens with growing anxiety as she anxiously wonders what kind of news regarding her missing child is about to be delivered. Terrifying thoughts overwhelm her mind, making her wonder if Laviella was caught by Gilbert or what tragedy befell Paul. Clutching her cloak in painful recollection, she shudders at the horrific possibility that her father might tear her beloved child away from her once and for all. The looming, monstrous shadow of her father's absolute control fills her with paralyzing dread, threatening to shatter her remaining strength. Her dark thoughts are suddenly shattered when jovial laughter echoes from the hallway. As the grand double doors swing open, the Marquis boasts about his daughter's renowned beauty to his honored guest, commanding Gretel to step forward and offer a proper greeting. With a proud flourish, the Marquis formally presents the prospective groom as Duke Esperanza, declaring that their marriage negotiations are underway. Placing a gloved hand over his heart with refined posture, the tall and remarkably handsome nobleman smiles smoothly and introduces himself as Jack Esperanza. Gretel turns to face him, her breath catching as her eyes widen in sheer, unadulterated shock at the unexpected man standing before her. Under the warm sunlight filtering through dense green trees, a royal carriage rolls smoothly along the quiet country road, carrying the Duke and his loyal aide toward their destination. Inside the quiet cabin, the Duke breaks the long silence with a casual remark about the fine weather outside. Serpin hesitates for a moment before addressing his master, leaning forward to bring up the serious matter weighing on his mind. Without beating around the bush, Serpin asks if his master is truly planning to proceed with his upcoming marriage to Gretel d'Armuid, holding his official documents tightly as he waits for an honest answer. The Duke responds with an unbothered smirk, questioning whether there is any problem with the arrangement. Yet beneath that easy smile, Serpin instantly senses a razor-sharp gaze that makes him inwardly break into a sweat. Serpin speaks candidly, arguing that this political union brings no real advantage to their house. He points out that Marquis d'Armuid is infamous for his insatiable greed, warning that the Marquis clearly intends to use this marriage to swallow Esperanza whole. The looming threat of the Marquis' overwhelming ambition looms large over their domain, like a venomous serpent coiled and waiting to devour everything in its path. Fixing his intense red eyes on his advisor, the Duke asks if it's daring to question his judgment. Serpin refuses to back down, reminding his master how he was taken in as a commoner and given a chance as an official aide. Serpin firmly states that it is his absolute duty to offer counsel whenever he sees his master heading down the wrong path, to which the Duke simply smiles and asks if that is truly how he views his role. Inwardly, the Duke deeply appreciates that Serp never shrinks back from him, valuing a talent who speaks their mind with absolute sincerity. This bold honesty instantly reminds him of another spirited child he recently met. Conceding the point, the Duke agrees that Serpin's assessment of the situation is entirely accurate. However, with a sharp and resolute gaze, he instructs his aide to put his doubts aside, trust him completely, and leave the entire plan in his hands. The Duke's magnificent carriage rolls into the opulent courtyard of Marquis d'Armuid's estate, where household servants stand strictly assembled at the entrance to greet their distinguished guest. As Jack steps out onto the grounds, his arrival marks the beginning of a tense confrontation long avoided between two powerful noble houses. Inside the lavish hall, Marquis d'Armuid steps forward with a grand theatrical bow, placing his hand over his heart with excessive deference. With a slick, hypocritical smile, he remarks on how extraordinary it is to host the Duke, subtly mocking Jack's known habit of avoiding social calls with nobles of his standing. Jack responds with calm, sharp irony, while behind him, Serpin silently notes the Marquis' deceitful nature. Serpin remembers how the Duke has always preferred the company of genuine, talented young individuals, deliberately surrounding himself with real merit rather than indulging high society's shallow and manipulative elite. Because Jack consistently kept greedy, incompetent parasites at arm's length, Marquis d'Armuid had long fallen completely out of his favor. That cold rejection cut deep into the Marquis's fragile pride, leaving him festering with resentment for years and eagerly waiting to vent his bitter sarcasm at the young Duke. Refusing to indulge the Marquis' empty flattery, Jack calls out his name and cuts through the pretense with icy disdain. He openly declares his profound distaste for those who hide daggers behind a polite tongue, sternly warning the older noble to stop playing such undignified and petty word games. Standing tall over the Marquis, Jack delivers a final blunt truth, reminding him that he holds no standing to speak to the Duke as an equal. Gritting his teeth in deep humiliation, the Marquis stammers out an apology while his fist trembles in fury, all under Serpin's quietly amused gaze. Seething with unspoken rage, the Marquis broods bitterly over how rank reigns supreme over wealth. Furious at having to bow to a man so much younger, he vows to use his daughter Gretel's upcoming political marriage to secure an heir, secretly planning to shatter the Esperanza dukedom from within and devour it whole. Swallowing his wounded pride under Jack's stern command, Marquis d'Armuid lowers his head in forced humility, offering a hasty apology for his prior insolence. Swiftly shifting his demeanor, he ushers the Duke toward the grand drawing room, eagerly claiming that his daughter has been anticipating his arrival with great excitement. Inside the opulent room, Gretel sits rigid with sudden apprehension as the heavy doors swing open, her eyes widening at the sight of her prospective groom. Jack steps forward with effortless aristocratic poise, offering a gentle and refined greeting that momentarily casts an aura of charm across the tense room. Reaching out, Jack gently lifts her hand and kisses it, his piercing red eyes locking onto hers with quiet, irresistible intensity. Gretel stammers out a polite acknowledgement, but beneath her trembling composure, a troubling question haunts her. Why would a duke from the Empire's second most powerful family ever seek a marriage with her? The dark, painful reality echoes in her memory. Her ruthless father had previously demanded that she captivate Jack by any means necessary, holding a horrifying ultimatum over her head. promising to reveal whether her precious daughter, Levi, is dead or alive, only after she successfully carries out his deceptive scheme. Trapped in this agonizing position, Gretel lowers her head and offers a graceful, reverence-filled greeting, desperately striving to play her assigned role. Yet as a silent tear slips down her cheek, the crushing weight of her father's ruthless blackmail makes maintaining this feigned joy almost impossible. Suddenly overcome by guilt and terror, Gretel buries her face in her hands and recoils in distress, catching Jack entirely off guard. Her inner resolve crumbles as panic surges through her, realizing she cannot bring herself to act out this monstrous lie when her heart aches solely for her missing child. Witnessing her sudden breakdown, Marquis d'Armuid breaks into a nervous sweat and hastily attempts to laugh off her erratic behavior as simple maidenly excitement and nervousness. But behind his awkward, defensive grin, he seethes with intense fury, inwardly cursing his daughter for endangering his entire master plan. As Marquis d'Armuid nervously offers to retreat and bring his sobbing daughter back into the drawing room, Jack cuts in with calm authority. He requests to speak with Gretel in private, instructing the Marquis to step outside, though the flustered older noble stammers in frustration and tries to protest the Duke's sudden interference. Jack's resolute stance leaves him with no room to argue. Forced into compliance, the Marquis reluctantly bows out and leaves the room. Now alone in the quiet grand hall, Jack approaches the trembling young woman sitting curled on the sofa. Gentle and attentive in the face of her tearful breakdown, he calls her name and asks if she is all right. Desperately fighting to regain her composure, Gretel reminds herself that she cannot afford to fail if she ever hopes to learn whether her daughter Levi is safe. Swallowing her grief, she forces a bright, polite smile to her face, offering a quiet apology for her embarrassing bringing up the topic of their prospective marriage. Jack bluntly interrupts her, declaring that he has no desire for an actual marriage. Gretel gasps in utter astonishment, her eyes wide with confusion. Smoothing his coat, the Duke explains with composure that what he truly seeks is a strategic contract, one simply disguised as a marriage to deceive society. Reaching into his jacket, Jack presents a neatly folded envelope bearing a formal wax seal. He announces to the startled noblewoman that he carries a letter addressed directly to her, setting the stage for their unexpected alliance. A sealed letter is quietly presented, delivered directly into Lady Gretel's hands. The Duke steps forward into the room. Offering the message addressed specifically to her, she pauses for a brief moment, taking the envelope into her trembling hands. The moment her eyes land on the handwriting, shock cuts through Gretel's quiet composure. Tears instantly well in her eyes as she recognizes the distinctive beloved script of her daughter, Levi. Her breath hitches in disbelief. In the letter, Levi apologizes for the silence and reassures her mother that she is safe and unharmed. She asks her to trust the Duke's explanations and wait just a little longer. Clutching the paper to her chest, profound relief washes over Gretel. As the Duke speaks, Gretel gathers herself, her tears giving way to fierce resolve. Lowering the letter, she fixes him with a sharp, unyielding gaze, demanding an immediate explanation of what is truly going on. The Duke is caught off guard by her uncompromising stance. Rumors portrayed Gretel as a fragile beauty cowering in fear under her father's control. Yet the woman standing here bears no trace of weakness, carrying herself with proud, unwavering dignity. Standing face to face, Gretel refuses to back down under his towering presence. Intrigued by her unexpected courage and quiet fire, a subtle smile touches the Duke's face. Yielding gracefully to Lady Gretel's fierce demand, the Duke responds with an air of smooth, reassuring composure. With a subtle, intriguing smile touching his lips and a courteous hand resting on his chest, he willingly promises to lay out the entirety of his secret plan before her, ready to explain every single detail of Levi's true situation. Far away at a serene countryside residence where local children run freely under the bright sun, young Levi stands quietly inside her modest room. Exhaling a soft breath of profound relief, She glances down and reassures herself that her mother must have met the Duke by now, fervently hoping that Gretel is safe, healthy, and not too severely shaken by the unexpected letter. Picturing her beloved mother weeping tears of relief and confusion back at the mansion, Levy's heart swells with deep concern. Yet she vigorously shakes her head to dismiss her mounting anxieties, reminding herself that she cannot afford to waver or drown in worry when so much hinges on her own steadfast resolve. Reflecting back on the original novel's narrative, Levy reminds herself that Duke Esperanza was always portrayed as a noble man of absolute integrity who honored his vows. Confident that her mother will be thoroughly safe and cared for under the Duke's protection, she gathers her courage, placing complete faith in the contract they forged. Her loyal companion Paul is left utterly aghast when Levy calmly discloses her plan to enter an orphanage, shouting out in complete bewilderment. Meeting his distress with a gentle, serene smile, Levy explains that her contract with the Duke is a deliberate choice, a vital stepping stone towards severing their painful past and earning absolute freedom for both her mother and herself. She further reveals that since her cruel grandfather, the Marquis, will be visiting the Duke's estate frequently, she cannot risk being seen or recognized by him under any circumstances. Watching Paul's face darken with anxious helplessness, Levy softly apologizes for burdening him, tightly balling her hand into a fist with fierce determination to remain hidden and endure. Paul expresses his deep regret that he cannot accompany Levy directly, promising to do whatever it takes from his side to support her. Watching him, Levy steadies her resolve, knowing she must carry out her own role flawlessly. Interrupted from her thoughts, a staff member calls Levy to meet the head of the facility. Stepping into the office, she stands politely before the desk, ready to officially present herself. The head of the National Orphanage, Director Moran, notes down her entry, asking if her name is Ella. With a quiet breath, Levy confirms her alias, officially taking her first step into hiding. Director Marin evaluates the young girl closely, taking note of her frail, pale appearance and shabby clothes. Yet despite looking like a typical street orphan, the director notices a striking sense of immaculate posture and quiet dignity. Inquiring about her arrival, Director Moran learns from her assistant Anne that a handsome knight delivered the girl at dawn. Found wandering the streets with no traceable identity, the guard assumed she was an abandoned orphan. Recalling Paul's charming disguise and thorough cover story, Livy silently praises his flawless execution. Fully convinced by the account, Director Marin accepts that the child has no family, asking how long she has lived on the streets. The direct question about her parents catches Levy off guard for a sudden beat. Shadowing her face, she quickly gathers herself to put on a believable performance, determined to protect her mother at any cost. Tears quickly well in Levy's bright eyes as she puts on a sorrowful front, softly reminding herself that she can never allow her mother to suffer that awful fate again because of her. Seeing the fragile child break down in tears, Director Moran and Anne recoil in startled fluster, instantly blaming themselves for prying so directly into her past. Deeply embarrassed for touching upon such a painful subject, the director immediately drops the questioning and stamps her official approval, welcoming Ella into the facility. Leading her out into the bright courtyard, Anne warmly introduces Ella to the rest of the children, asking everyone to be kind and get along with their newest resident. Despite wearing faded, shabby clothes, Levy stands with immaculate posture and polished grace, immediately captivating the younger orphans who eagerly crowd around her with sweet compliments. Offering a serene, gentle smile, Levy politely expresses her pleasure at meeting them all, doing her utmost to play the part of a sweet, harmless orphan. But while the younger children welcome her with open arms, a cluster of older boys remain standing by the courtyard wall, keeping their distance while watching her every move with cool, unspoken mistrust. Leaning over, one of the boys quietly whispers to their leader that no matter how they look at her, this mysterious newcomer seems entirely too suspicious for someone claiming to live on the streets. Crossing his arms, the sharp-eyed young leader gazes back with calculating green eyes, harboring his own deep doubts about her sudden arrival. A vivid memory flashes back to their past encounter beneath the trees, where she cowered on the ground looking up at him with startled, wide eyes. Sensing that this delicate girl is hiding something significant behind her immaculate manners, the young leader silently vows to monitor her every move, confident that her true identity will be revealed before long. At a quiet orphanage nestled beneath the warm morning sun, lunch begins with a cheerful blessing as everyone settles together around the long wooden table. Looking over the well-prepared dish, she takes comfort in seeing how genuinely cared for the children are here. When little Sam notices her taking small bites and asks why she eats so slowly, she responds with a warm, patient smile. Noticing Sam has already finished his plate, she chuckles softly at his eager appetite. She then offers him a handful of rich chocolates given to her by a kind gentleman, bringing an instant shine to the young boy's eyes. Realizing that sharing treats is the most effective strategy to earn the children's trust, she leans in close to Sam. In a quiet whisper, she asks him who holds the real authority around the orphanage. Sam immediately points across the room to a group of older boys gathered together. Their leader is Benjamin, a bright and confident boy who glances back with sharp green eyes and a playful smirk. Out in the sunlit courtyard, the children dash about in a lively game of tag, filling the peaceful afternoon with their laughter and playful energy. When the energetic children eagerly ask her to play hide-and-seek, she warmly agrees to be the seeker. As they scatter merrily across the courtyard, she rests against a tree trunk, savoring this blissful afternoon as a peaceful refuge from her heavy burdens. Thinking back to her harrowing escape through the forest with Paul and her intense meeting with the Duke, those dangerous moments feel wonderfully distant now. She carefully searches the garden, discovering 8 hiding children, one by one, until only little Sam remains concealed. Dashing across the grass to hunt for Sam, she calls out his name just as her shoe steps onto brittle, camouflaged branches. The hidden cover suddenly snaps under her weight, sending her plunging downward into a deep pit trap with a sharp, startled cry. Landing heavily on the dirt floor below, she rubs her bruised shoulder, quickly realizing that this sudden fall was no accident. A calm voice speaks from high above, reassuring her that the pit was dug without sharp spikes so she wouldn't be seriously hurt. Glancing up in disbelief, she recognizes Benjamin standing right at the edge of the trap beside a trembling Sam. A fight. Sam nervously grips the older vest, pleading with Benjamin to spare the kind guest who shared her sweet chocolates. Offering a warm smile, Benjamin gently pats Sam's head and assures him that he merely wants to speak with her privately. Once the younger boy walks away, Benjamin turns back toward the pit, waving goodbye with a confident and intriguing expression. Trapped at the bottom of the earthen pit, she looks up and calls out Benjamin's name, demanding to know why he trapped her so suddenly. High above, the bright-eyed boy peers down with a stern, unyielding expression, completely unmoved by her startled confrontation. Crossing his arms, Benjamin bluntly asks if she is truly an orphan. When she stammers out a quick denial, he holds up the chocolates she gave little Sam, pointing out that a penniless child from the streets could never afford such an expensive luxury. She quickly claims a noble gave them to her, but Benjamin tears through her excuse. He reveals that despite claiming she begged on the streets, her hands are completely soft and smooth without a single callus, leaving her horrified by her own careless oversight. Noticing the guilty expression on her face, Benjamin offers to let her leave quietly, warning that the orphanage has no room for frauds. Yet even as she sits helpless at the bottom of the pit, she lowers her head and firmly refuses to go. She understands why the children guard their haven so fiercely against suspicious outsiders. But with her own life and her mother's future resting entirely on this plan, she knows she cannot afford to back down now. Determined to protect her sanctuary, she presses a hand to her chest and looks up into the dimming light. She passionately begs Benjamin for a chance to stay, promising she won't cause any trouble, and offering to help take care of the younger orphans if he will only turn a blind eye. Determined to find a way forward, she offers to help all the orphans get adopted into loving families if he will only let her stay. Looking up from the bottom of the pit, she desperately begs Benjamin to trust her just this once. Yet Benjamin remains completely unmoved by her emotional plea, coldly stating that he cannot bring himself to trust someone so deeply suspicious. He turns on his heel and walks away, leaving her calling out frantically for him to wait. Before he can take another step, a shadow falls over the sunny courtyard as a tall visitor calls out his name. Benjamin freezes in utter surprise, his bright green eyes widening in alarm as he nervously backs away, demanding to know who this intruder is. Stepping forward with quiet elegance, the sharp-eyed young gentleman in silver-chained glasses fixes Benjamin with a cool, unyielding gaze. Reminding the boy that outsiders aren't allowed inside, he looks down toward the pit and demands a clear explanation for what is happening. An anxious boy reacts with intense alarm at the unexpected intruder, demanding to know who he is and why he has interrupted. He is met by a poised, dark-haired youth who introduces himself as Lucian Seeklight, the newly assigned infirmary aide, who calmly asks what is taking place in this courtyard. Struggling at the bottom of the deep pit, the young girl looks up in shock, completely stunned to see Lucian appearing at such a moment. Turning his gaze away from her, Lucian fixes the trembling boy with an unyielding look, demanding an immediate explanation for why she has been left trapped below. From the darkness of the pit, the girl calls out in desperate hope, pleading for Lucian to help her back up. She reveals that her leg was injured during sudden fall, prompting Lucian to offer a swift, quiet nod of agreement as he immediately prepares to pull her free. Noticing the true depth of the drop, Lucian turns to the reluctant boy and asks him to lend a hand, causing the boy to flinch under his gaze. When the boy stammers in resistance, Lucian calmly presses him further, asking if he was the one responsible for trapping her inside. Lucian's cool demeanor creates an overbearing pressure that completely overwhelms the flustered boy, leaving him shrinking back in fright. Trapped below, the girl observes the tense standoff with wide eyes, realizing with surprise that Lucian possesses such a stern and commanding side to his personality. Completely intimidated, the boy hastily yields and reaches out his arm, joining Lucian as they both lean far over the ledge. Softly advising her to take care as she ascends, they extend their open hands downward, met by the girl's relieved gaze from the bottom of the pit. With a firm pull, she is lifted out of the pit and stands safely back on solid ground beside them. The anxious boy fidgets nervously, stammering out a quiet apology, but her sharp gasp of pain cuts him off as she winces and clutches her injured leg in distress. Observing her hand, Lucian softly inquires what has happened, causing the nervous boy to gaze down in absolute panic at the sight of the scratch. Overwhelmed by fear of severe consequences, the frightened boy frantically stammers that this will not do, insisting he must run to fetch a teacher right away. As Lucian prepares to investigate the truth behind the incident, Ella quickly calls out to interrupt him and diffuse the rising tension. She smoothly claims that Benjamin was merely trying to help her out of the deep pit, turning to the stunned, wide-eyed boy to ask for his agreement. Knowing that involving the academy teachers would only create difficult complications for both of them, Ella wisely chooses to protect him instead. She decides it is far better to gain a debt of gratitude than build unnecessary resentment, offering him a bright, sweet smile as she suggests settling the matter right here. Lucian calmly accedes to her request, adjusting his spectacles as he decides her immediate treatment must take priority over everything else. But when the anxious boy calls after them in desperation, Lucian turns back with an intimidating, shadow-filled glare, chillingly assuring him that they will speak again later. Placing a gentle, supportive hand around her waist, Lucian ushers Ella away from the courtyard, emphasizing that they must hurry to clean her bleeding hand. Left standing all alone in the quiet sunlight, the boy watches their departing figures in heavy silence, tightly clenching his hand into a frustrated fist. Upon reaching the calm of the infirmary, Lucian gently sits across from her and takes her injured hand into his gloved palms. Picking up the medical tools, he softly warns her that the disinfectant will sting a little, keeping his touch steady as a soft gasp escapes her lips. Leaning in close, Lucian expertly wraps clean white bandages around her wounded palm, his focused gaze fixed entirely on her comfort and safety. Holding her neatly bandaged hand with tender, lingering care, he reassures her with a calm voice, expressing quiet relief that the scrapes are fortunately not too deep. Curious about his sudden appearance at the Academy infirmary, Ella looks up in surprise and asks Lucian how he managed to get here. Lucian calmly explains that the Duke personally instructed him to stay by her side and protect her, pointing out that sending an adult knight would have drawn far too much unwanted attention. Lucian further reveals that he was fully informed of the secret contract between her and the Duke. Fixing her with an unyielding gaze through his spectacles, he quietly presses her, asking if there is anything else he ought to know. Realizing she almost let slip her memories of her past life and her knowledge of his true history, Ella quickly catches herself. She covers her brief panic with a bright, warm smile, softly assuring him that it is nothing and still far too early to discuss. Before Lucian can press any further, the quiet moment is broken as the infirmary door slowly swings open. A hesitant Benjamin timidly steps inside, nervously clutching his neck as he asks if her injuries are all right. Ella turns to him in surprise, while Lucian observes the boy with an unreadable look. Gathering the tray of medical tools, Lucian quietly tells her that he will go put away the supplies. Ella offers him a soft word of thanks, but just as he turns to leave, Lucian suddenly pauses and looks back, calling her name once more. Leaning down remarkably close to her ear, Lucian whispers a quiet promise to stay nearby and return in an instant if she ever feels threatened. The unexpected warmth of his voice leaves her wide-eyed and flustered, her heart fluttering as he calmly steps away. As Lucian walks past Benjamin toward the back room, his gentle demeanor instantly vanishes into a cold, menacing aura. Passing shoulder to shoulder, he delivers a chilling warning for Benjamin not to try any foolish tricks, leaving the terrified boy frozen in shock at his overwhelming pressure. Left alone with Ella inside the infirmary, Benjamin timidly steps forward to explain himself. He admits that the pit was merely a secret play area where he had planned to lower a rope ladder after questioning her, bowing his head as he offers a sincere apology for acting so rashly. Pleased by his quick repentance, Ella smilingly accepts his apology, realizing he is not a bad person at heart despite his initial distrust. Entrusting him with the truth, she reveals that her real name is Laviella and that she fled to the academy to escape those seeking her life. Shocked by the grave danger surrounding her, Benjamin passionately promises to keep her secret safe until the peril passes. Wanting to solidify their newfound trust, Ella asks Benjamin to hold out his hand before gently placing sweet-wrapped candies into his open palm as a peace offering. Inviting him to speak casually so they can become genuine friends, Ella laughs with bright, heartwarming innocence. Touched by her radiant kindness, Benjamin clutches his chest in stunned silence, a deep blush coloring his face as his heart skips a beat. With their past misunderstandings resolved, she offers a radiant smile, warmly telling Benjamin that she looks forward to getting along with him. Flustered by her kindness, Benjamin blushes deeply while his heart flutters. He hesitantly clears his throat and asks if he may hold her injured hand, and she gently places her bandaged palm into his. Gently holding her bandaged wrist, Benjamin gazes down with tender concern, softly apologizing for the pain she suffered. He then leans close and gently blows on her wound to soothe it. The unexpected warmth leaves Laviella completely flustered, prompting an innocent Benjamin to ask if blowing on an injury isn't the right way to help. Benjamin sheepishly explains that his older brother always blew on his injuries, taking Laviella completely by surprise since she never knew he had a sibling. But before he can elaborate, heavy footsteps approach, and a stern voice cuts in to ask what they think they are doing. Lucian suddenly steps in and firmly grabs Benjamin's wrist, breaking his hold on her. As Laviella gasps his name in surprise, Lucian sharply scolds Benjamin for acting so rudely toward an injured person. Undeterred, Benjamin turns to confront him, maintaining that he was only offering a sincere apology. Fierce sparks fly between the two boys as they glare intensely at each other in a silent battle of wills. Caught directly in the middle of their sudden hostility, Laviella can only look back and forth in complete bewilderment, wondering why the mood between them suddenly turned so competitive. Meanwhile, far away from their commotion, a green-haired man sits at a grand desk in his study. Holding a newly delivered document, he hums thoughtfully to himself as his eyes scan the letter, intrigued by the unexpected mention of a marriage contract. In his lavishly decorated study, the green-haired Marquis carefully considers an urgent marriage proposal sent by Duke Esperanza for Gretel's hand. Knowing the Duke to be a formidable, calculating figure who never backs down in the imperial court, the Marquis refuses to believe he's simply lost his mind over Gretel's beauty, suspecting a far more dangerous motive behind the sudden offer. Steepling his fingers thoughtfully at his desk, the Marquis sees past the mystery and recognizes an opportunity far too valuable to pass up. When his butler inquires about another suitor named Sir Patrick Bryan, the Marquis dismisses him without hesitation, coldly instructing his servant to dispatch a formal letter of rejection to the knight. Though Sir Patrick Bryan is a rising war hero with a commendable reputation on the battlefield, the Marquis considers him nothing more than a novice when compared to the grand prestige of House Esperanza. To elevate his own standing within the imperial court, securing an alliance with the empire's finest house is infinitely superior to aligning with a mere soldier. Slashing his hand down onto the proposal document, the Marquis resolves to push this marriage forward, regardless of whatever scheme the Duke might be harboring. A dark, cunning smile creeps across his face as he secretly envisions using this union to manipulate the situation and eventually swallow House Esperanza whole. Before he can dwell further on his ruthless political schemes, the heavy footsteps of a battle-scarred knight interrupt the quiet of the study. Clad in a dark cloak bearing an emblem, the veteran knight steps forward to deliver an official progress report regarding the secret assignment given to him days prior. The Marquis scans the written report, which confirms that young Laviella's body has still not been recovered despite an ongoing search, though traces of her movements have recently been discovered in a southern trade city. Holding the message in his hand, his stern expression hardens as troubling questions begin to mount. He reflects on how the young girl abruptly escaped, accompanied only by a single knight named Paul. He had originally presumed that Gretel orchestrated her daughter's secret flight, yet Gretel's overwhelming, tearful grief proved she knew nothing about it. As a drop of sweat trickles down his face, the Marquis arrives at a deeply unsettling realization. Something about this entire situation is fundamentally wrong. Sensing that a mysterious, unseen hand must be secretly pulling the strings behind Laviella's sudden flight, the Marquis feels a cold wave of unease wash over him. The troubling realization that a hidden enemy is orchestrating events leaves him deeply unsettled. Before he can dwell further on the mystery, his assistant presents a sealed document bearing the royal seal of the imperial palace. The Marquis looks up in sharp surprise, as he is informed that the urgent message has arrived directly from Her Majesty the Empress. Inside, the Empress desperately inquires whether the true successor of the Holy Spirit has finally been located. Trapped between the chaotic collapse of his own household and intense pressure from his royal superiors, the Marquis grimly acknowledges that his time is running short. Turning to his battle-scared knight Gilbert, the Marquis firmly commands him to expand the search party by mobilizing even more troops across the territory. Desperate for any strategic advantage, he asks if they have a priest in their pocket, prompting his assistant to suggest Priest Cesare. Though Priest Cesare possesses unimpressive holy power, the Marquis knows he is a greedy man who can easily be bought with gold. He orders his men to send Cesare deep into the capital's orphanages and lowest slums, tapping his desk thoughtfully as he weighs their next move. To maximize their chances, the Marquis hands over a detailed sketch of young Laviella to be passed along as well. He instructs his servant to give her description to the priest, hoping Cesare might accidentally cross paths with the runaway girl during his thorough investigation. Meanwhile, far away from the dark political machinations of the capital, a bright and cheerful atmosphere fills the orphanage courtyard where children play. Inside the wooden corridor, young Laviella pauses in curiosity, wondering why the building feels so unusually noisy today. Noticing Benjamin standing by the wooden staircase, Laviella quickly rushes over to greet him. Looking up at him with innocent, wide eyes, she asks if something special is taking place, since everyone in the house seems so unusually restless. Benjamin flashes a warm, cheerful smile, explaining that prospective adoptive parents are visiting today to offer the orphans a loving home. Yet, as he speaks about everyone's excitement, he rubs his neck awkwardly, unable to fully hide the subtle sorrow lingering in his eyes. Noticing his sudden change in mood, Laviella gently asks Benjamin if he plans to see the adoptive parents as well. Flustered by her innocent question, Benjamin rubs the back of his neck in awkward hesitation, stammering quietly as he tries to hide the subtle sorrow lingering behind his smile. Before he has to explain himself, Benjamin catches sight of a commotion outside and quickly points down the corridor. He exclaims that the visiting priests have just arrived, as excited orphans gather around a tall figure in white robes who regularly visits to bring treats and care for sick children. Eager to break the heavy atmosphere, Benjamin takes Laviella warmly by the hand and pulls her along to join the excitement. Taken by surprise by his sudden motion, she lets out a soft gasp as he leads her toward the cheerful crowd outside. An eager orphan boy rushes up to the new holy man, curiously asking for his name. Offering a serene and gentle smile, the priest softly introduces himself as Cesare. Laviella looks up with a radiant smile, completely unaware that this seemingly kindly man is the greedy priest sent by the Marquis to search for her. Eager for the sweet treats handed out by the temple priests, Lucian dashes ahead while holding Ella's hand, urging her to keep up. Ella laughs softly in response, her face lit with pure innocence as she reminds him that they need to hurry before all the delicious snacks are completely gone. Before they can take another step forward, a white-gloved hand suddenly reaches out and grabs hold of their clothes, bringing their carefree sprint to an abrupt halt. Startled by the unexpected interference, Lucian and Ella freeze in their tracks, looking back in complete surprise at the quiet companion standing behind them. Raising a white-gloved finger to his lips, the dark-haired boy quietens them with a hushed whisper just as heavy white boots step softly into view. Without a word of explanation, he quickly pulls Ella into a protective embrace behind his back, leaving Lucian utterly flustered by the sudden, intense display of caution. The priest steps closer with a serene, gentle smile, inquiring if anything is amiss. Scrambling to shield his friends from scrutiny, Lucian awkwardly throws his arms out to block the priest's view, panicking internally as he tries to make sense of why his companion is holding Ella so protectively. A heavy silence settles over the garden as the dark-haired boy remains pressed closely beside Ella, refusing to offer a single word of explanation. Realizing that something is deeply wrong with the mysterious tension in the air, Lucian decides he must quickly find a plausible way for all of them to escape. Lucian hastily fabricates an excuse, claiming his friends are suddenly feeling unwell and need to be taken straight to the infirmary. Though the priest calmly offers to cure their ailments using his holy magic, his eyes narrow beneath a dark shadow, revealing a cold, sinister edge behind his pleasant facade. Quickly insisting that their condition requires ordinary medicine rather than sacred power, Lucian calls out his hasty thanks and makes a desperate retreat alongside his companions. The priest calls after them to wait, watching their abrupt departure with an unsettled, lingering stare. As they rush indoors to escape the priest's sinister presence, Their brown-haired companion frantically demands to know what is taking place. Lucian maintains a solemn, focused composure, quietly insisting that they secure themselves inside before speaking about the hidden danger. Once gathered inside the room, their friend sits cross-legged on the floor as he attempts to piece everything together. Looking up, he confronts Lucian directly, asking if he truly journeyed all this way for the sole purpose of shielding Ella from impending harm. Lucian offers a firm, straightforward confirmation, acknowledging that protecting Ella has been his primary intention from the very beginning. However, his grave expression signals that the plot unfolding against her is far darker than any of them had anticipated. Lucian discloses an alarming truth, explaining that Priest Cesare is secretly allied with the villains attempting to capture Ella. Ella listens in stunned silence as Lucian details how he chanced upon the priests whispering quietly among themselves behind the orphanage grounds. Recalling the chilling sight, Lucian describes how the priests planned to search the area discreetly so the orphanage staff would remain completely unaware. Most unsettling of all, Priest Cesare held a detailed portrait of Ella, confirming that she was their direct target. The atmosphere, heavy with tension, grows even darker as the name Marquis d'Armuid is identified as the mastermind behind the entire abduction scheme. The terrifying revelation hits Ella with crushing weight, leaving her trembling in shock as her worst fears materialize. When their friend anxiously asks what would happen if the priests were to capture her, Ella buries her face in her hands, overcome by grief. She softly confesses that being caught means being stolen away forever, condemned to die alone in captivity without ever seeing her mother again. Refusing to let her succumb to despair, her energetic companion leaps to his feet with fists clenched in passionate defiance. Placing a hand over his heart beside a calm Lucian, he fiercely vows that the two of them will guard her together, ensuring she never faces danger alone. Lucian firmly refuses to meet with the temple clergy, explaining with solemn quietness that certain circumstances prevent him from ever approaching them directly. As a cold shadow settles across his eyes, he reluctantly admits that priests make him deeply uncomfortable, leaving his companions utterly stunned by this unexpected glimpse into his quiet, hidden discomfort. Ella listens in stunned silence, frantically searching her detailed memories of the original story to recall whether Lucian ever possessed such an intense aversion to the priesthood. As Benjamin stands, watching thoughtfully beside them, Ella comes to realize that Lucian's guarded demeanor isn't just about keeping her safe from Marquis d'Armuid, but stems from dark personal reasons of his own. Breaking the heavy tension in the room, Benjamin brightens up and proudly steps forward to take full charge of their predicament. Reminding them that he knows the orphanage grounds far better than the two newcomers, he enthusiastically promises to handle everything himself and guide them to a secret hideout where they will be completely safe from discovery. Guiding them into a quiet room under renovation, Benjamin pulls out a thick, dark cloak and carefully wraps it around Ella to keep her concealed. Though she finds the makeshift blanket disguise rather cramped, she remains quiet inside while Lucian agrees to stay nearby, focusing entirely on avoiding any direct contact with the searching priests outside. Benjamin offers to lead Lucian to a secret vantage point where he can carefully observe the priest's movements without exposing himself to any danger. As the two boys prepare to hurry into position, Ella calls out Benjamin's name with an expression of profound relief, deeply moved by how quickly and selflessly he leapt to her defense. Looking up at him with a gentle, radiant smile, Ella thanks Benjamin from the bottom of her heart for protecting them without asking a single suspicious question. Delighted by her warm words, Benjamin excitedly asks if this means she finally forgives his past misdeeds at the pit, reassuring her that he will return to retrieve her the moment the priests leave. With a bright, mischievous grin, Benjamin whispers to Lucian that it is finally time to put their secret strategy into motion. Together, the two companions carefully map out a multi-step plan to monitor the searching clergy from the bushes, keep them constantly off balance, and quietly retrieve the dangerous portrait of Ella before it can ever be used against her. Putting their grand scheme into immediate action, Benjamin eagerly instructs the younger orphanage children to swarm Priest Cesare with innocent requests to play. The cheerful toddlers happily scamper over and wrap their arms around the priest's robes, completely pinning him in place under an overwhelming flood of childlike affection that he cannot easily turn down. Thoroughly exhausted and visibly drained by the relentless crowd of energetic children, Priest Cesare finally gives up and announces their departure from the grounds. As the unsuspecting orphanage staff wheeze them goodbye, a fellow priest quietly admits that they failed to find the targeted girl, leaving Cesare to grimace in bitter frustration as he reluctantly accepts defeat. Thrilled by the complete success of their clever diversion, Benjamin and Lucian celebrate their victory before hurrying back indoors to check on Ella. As they dash down the wooden corridor, Lucian offers a rare, quiet word of genuine gratitude, prompting Benjamin to beam with a proud grin and playfully remind Lucian that he will definitely expect to be paid back later. Throwing open the wooden door to deliver the wonderful news, Benjamin calls out to Ella with relief, only for his voice to echo into a silent room. The makeshift hiding spot sits completely deserted, sending a surge of pure panic through both boys as they stare into the vacant space, terrified that the searching priest somehow managed to capture her. Their horror turns to heartbreak as they look further inside and spot Ella lying motionlessly on the wooden floor. Rushing frantically to her side, they find her suffering from a violent flare-up, her face burning red with a harsh fever as she gasps painfully for breath, completely overwhelmed by the tragic secret illness that threatens to claim her life. Laviella suddenly collapses from a burning fever, her face flushed deep red as heavy sweat drips down her cheek. Seeing her helpless state, the young boy beside her freezes in utter panic. His dark-haired companion sharply tells him to snap out of it, gently gathering the unconscious girl into his arms to hurry away. Left behind in the dim hallway, the young boy stares after them with wide, anxious eyes. Deeply shaken by her sudden collapse, he stands frozen in place, filled with worry and uncertainty. 4 hours earlier, someone urgently escorts a priest through the building, while young Laviella sits alone, wrapped tightly in a heavy brown cloak. Feeling weak and frustrated by her fragile health, she desperately tries to convince herself that staying still is the best way to help those working so hard for her. Yet a harsh coughing fit shatters her patience as she senses a fever coming on. Determined not to burden Lucian unnecessarily, she takes matters into her own hands, stepping out into the quiet wooden hallway to sneak over to the infirmary for medicine. As her small boots step softly across the wooden floor, the sudden sound of approaching voices catches her off guard. Gasping in alarm, Laviella quickly pulls back behind a wall, peeking cautiously from the shadows to see who is coming. 2 visiting priests stroll through the hallway, conversing in low tones about a faint trace of holy power lingering in the area. Surprised that sacred energy could exist inside a simple orphanage, one of them reaches out to turn a door handle to investigate further. Overhearing their conversation from her hiding spot, Laviella's eyes widen in absolute shock and panic. A wave of dread washes over her as she realizes the priests are about to search inside the very infirmary she was trying to reach. Though Laviella does not fully understand why sacred energy lingers in these quiet halls, she knows one truth: priests make her deeply uncomfortable. Leaving things as they are will put Lucian in severe danger, as his personal belongings remain hidden inside the room. She must retrieve his medical bag before the holy men search the infirmary and discover his secret. Overwhelmed by panic yet determined to act, Laviella suddenly catches sight of young Sam standing nearby. Swallowing her fear, she calls out to him in a desperate whisper, begging for his help to pull off a swift distraction before the priests step inside. Inside the corridor, the senior priest confirms that traces of holy power definitely remain, instructing his fellow clergymen to search deeper inside. But before they can enter, Sam bursts into the doorway with a loud, dramatic shout. Clenching his fists in fake panic, he breathlessly announces that suspicious intruders were spotted sneaking through the backyard, claiming the other priests have already rushed off to catch them. The mention of suspicious intruders instantly reminds the priest of the wanted drawing, depicting the young blonde girl Lord Cesare has been searching for. Convinced this disturbance could be their golden lead, the startled holy men abandon their search of the infirmary and rush out after the alleged trespassers. Knowing Sam has bought her precious time, Laviella takes a deep breath and moves fast. Her boots patter softly across the floorboards as she sneaks into the quiet infirmary, her eyes lighting up the moment she spots Lucian's brown doctor bag sitting on the wooden cabinet shelf. Just as she extends her hands to snatch the heavy leather case, the heavy thud of a white leather boot shatters the silence. Laviella turns around, her eyes wide with overwhelming dread. One of the priests stands in the doorway, staring down at her with a sharp, suspicious look as he asks why a young orphan girl is creeping around all alone inside. Trapped under the priest's sharp scrutiny, Laviella's heart leaps into her throat as absolute dread threatens to paralyze her. But before Holy Man can press the helpless girl for answers, Sam suddenly interrupts with a loud, theatrical scream. Grabbing tight to the priest's white robe, the young boy instantly creates a frantic disturbance. Clenching his fists in dramatic panic, Sam lies that Lord Cesare himself has urgently summoned all visiting clergy to another area. He boldly warns the priest that he will face harsh punishment for lingering behind. Completely caught off guard by the boy's sudden outburst, the bewildered priest stammers in confusion while Sam secretly signals Laviella to run. Seizing the brief window of opportunity, Laviella clutches Lucian's heavy medical bag firmly against her chest and bolts. She dashes right past the startled priest in a blur of white fabric. Realizing he has been tricked, the priest reaches out to catch her, but Sam bravely throws his weight against the holy man to block his pursuit. Her small boots patter rapidly across the wooden floorboards until she finally ducks around a corner, slumping exhausted against a closed door. Chest heaving as she desperately tries to catch her breath, Laviella hugs the brown leather case close, beaming with relief and immense gratitude for Sam's clever distraction. As the sudden surge of adrenaline fades, a severe wave of heat and dizziness sweeps over her fragile body. Staggering weak-kneed, she realizes her fever is spiking dangerously from the intense exertion. Yet despite her failing strength, she feels profound relief knowing she successfully protected Lucian's secret before her strength completely gives out and darkness takes over. Returning to the present moment 4 hours later, Benjamin listens in wide-eyed shock as Sam finishes recounting the dangerous ordeal. Beside them in the dim hallway, the dark-haired boy gently cradles Laviella's feverish, unconscious body against his chest, his dark eyes filled with silent concern as he prepares to carry her to safety. Reassuring young Sam for his bravery, the dark-haired boy gently eases the child's lingering doubts. Sam's face instantly lights up with excitement and joy, immensely relieved to learn that his dramatic distraction genuinely helped save Laviella from severe danger. Once Sam happily runs off to play outside, a heavy silence settles over the quiet infirmary. Benjamin openly blames himself for being away during the crisis, while his dark-haired companion quietly reflects on his own misjudgment, realizing the visiting priests were secretly hunting for him. Gazing down at unconscious Laviella lying in bed, the dark-haired boy comes to a chilling realization. Despite failing to track his whereabouts for so many long years, the Empress has clearly never abandoned her relentless search to hunt him down. The dangerous shadow of that ruthless Empress looms large in his memories, reminding him of his hidden past. Realizing her imperial agents are still actively searching for him fills his heart with deep foreboding as he contemplates the grave risk now facing them. Sensing his companion's heavy mood, Benjamin places a firm, reassuring hand on his shoulder. He warmly encourages the young doctor to stop dwelling on gloomy thoughts and focus entirely on helping Laviella recover her health as quickly as possible. Softening his stern expression with a faint, appreciative smile, the young doctor agrees with Benjamin's sensible advice. He promptly asks his friend to fetch a basin of cool water so he can prepare a wet compress to bring down Laviella's burning fever. The moment Benjamin leaves the room, glowing purple wings of ethereal magic flutter softly into existence around him. A silent entity questions why he would ever unleash his suppressed abilities after rejecting them for so long, sternly warning him that the price to pay is dangerously high. Looking upon Laviella's flushed, suffering face, he rejects the entity's warning without a single moment of hesitation. With unwavering resolve gleaming in his eyes, he willingly accepts whatever heavy toll his magic demands, determined to heal her and protect her life no matter the cost. As shimmering magical energy swirls softly around them, the young doctor remains completely steadfast in his decision, Laviella's life. Though unleashing his forbidden power threatens to reveal his location to the Empress and exact a severe personal toll, he refuses to hesitate for even a single moment. With unwavering resolve, he channels his magic to soothe her fever, determined to protect her no matter what consequences await. A glowing purple spirit butterfly hovers in the dark, noting how long it has been since he last removed his gloves. Without a word, the young boy unbuttons and pulls off his white gloves, preparing to channel his hidden power. Fixing a cold, determined gaze behind his glasses, he sternly commands the spirit to stop talking nonsense and get to work. Nearby, Laviella lies unconscious in bed, her cheeks burning with a dangerous fever that consumes her life force like a flickering candle rushing toward death. Reaching down, he tenderly takes hold of her feverish hand while sitting close beside her bedside. In an instant, a massive purple aura bursts around the room, swirling with magical energy as he channels his power directly into her frail body. Gritting his teeth from the intense strain, he pushes back the dark afflictions surrounding her. Holy light surges brightly through their tightly clasped hands, using the power of the divine spirit to drive away the lethal energy that has taken root inside Laviella. Warm golden light bathes her resting face, calling her spirit back to life. Brilliant golden magic sweeps over her chest and torso, replacing the lingering darkness with peaceful healing energy that restores her strength. Morning arrives with bright sunlight streaming over the academy trees, while a small bird chirps on a branch outside. Opening her eyes to the quiet infirmary, Laviella slowly wakes up and sits upright in bed, looking around in confusion as she realizes where she has been brought. Recollecting with a jolt that she collapsed in the empty classroom yesterday, she wonders if Lucien and Benjamin were the ones who carried her to safety. Typically, the morning after an episode brings agonizing pain, yet as she gazes down at her hands in astonishment, her body feels miraculously light and completely pain-free. As Laviella flexes her hands, she is deeply astonished by how light, pain-free, and healthy her body feels. Sitting upright in bed, her eyes light up as she calls out to Lucien. He gazes back with a soft, gentle expression, warmly greeting her and inquiring how she feels after her terrifying episode. Although she reassures him that she feels perfectly fine, Laviella hesitates as her eyes take in his drawn appearance. Noticing how pale, thoroughly exhausted, and drained he looks behind his spectacles, her tone turns anxious as she asks whether something terrible occurred during the night while she was unconscious. Before Lucien can answer her question, Benjamin cheerfully jumps in, loudly blurting out that Lucien stayed up all night long by her bedside. Swatting Benjamin's arm off his shoulder, a flustered Lucien defensively insists he simply gave her medicine and stayed nearby to monitor her high fever. Lucien maintains that the restorative tonic he administered is the sole reason her energy returned so quickly. Laviella responds with a wide-eyed nod, yet inwardly she wonders if ordinary medicine could truly cure such severe pain, suspecting there might be a hidden truth behind his miraculous cure. Changing the subject with characteristic energy, Benjamin happily declares that the dangerous priests have finally departed, meaning they are all completely safe now. Lucian quietly agrees with a subtle nod, bringing a bright, peaceful smile to Laviella's face as all her lingering anxiety melts away. Gazing fondly at both of her loyal proud companions, Laviella beams with profound sincerity as she offers them her deepest thanks for coming to her rescue. Her bright, beautiful smile bathes the quiet infirmary in warmth, filling the room with a sense of pure relief and comfort. Her sweet gratitude catches both boys completely off guard, sending a furious red blush across their faces as they fluster and awkwardly stammer out excuses. Seeing their endearing embarrassment, Laviella tightly clenches her fists with firm determination, resolving in her heart to repay their incredible kindness in full. Meanwhile, in the heart of the imperial capital, Duke Caligo sits within his grand estate, carefully reviewing confidential reports. News of the Marquis priests aggressively searching through local orphanages raises immediate concern about their enemy's next move. Pondering the document in his hands, the Duke listens as his trusted aide, Serpin, voices his growing unease over how quickly the Marquis managed to initiate his search across the city. Serpin anxiously questions whether confidential information leaked regarding Lady Laviella's hiding place, but the Duke firmly doubts it, suspecting the Marquis's true target was actually Lucian all along. Connecting the clues, Serpin realizes with sudden shock that the rumors surrounding the Empress searching for the true successor of the Holy Spirit must be true, putting Lord Lucian directly in the crosshairs of imperial politics. Before the Duke can finish commanding Serpin to quietly investigate the Empress's motives further, their serious discussion is suddenly interrupted by an urgent shout from the doorway. Throwing the curtains wide with enthusiasm, the head dressmaker gleefully announces that Lady Gretel has finished her wardrobe fitting. Brimming with pride, she promises a sight as gorgeous as a fairy, coaxing a soft, expectant smile from the Duke as he waits to view her transformation. Stepping into the warm light, Gretel appears in a magnificent snow-white reception gown. Elegant lace and delicate embroidery wrap around her silhouette as she hesitantly holds the dressmaker's hand, softly asking how she looks. Framed by fresh white blossoms, her vivid purple eyes shimmer with gentle shyness. Her golden hair falls gracefully over her shoulders, creating an aura of pure elegance that leaves no doubt of her noble presence. The stunning transformation leaves Serpin gasping in absolute disbelief, his eyes wide with shock. Beside him, the Duke's eyes soften completely into a serene, captivated smile as he gazes at the woman before him. As the dressmaker gushes over her boutique's signature reception design, Gretel glances sideways with flustered hesitation. Secretly overwhelmed that this is already her fifth elaborate gown for a mere contract marriage, she meekly asks the Duke for his honest opinion. Conveying her humble feeling that such splendor is far more than she deserves, she looks to him for reassurance. Closing his eyes with a tender, devoted smile, the Duke warmly declares that nothing in his domain is too grand for his bride, promising her that her beauty far surpasses any gown. Leaning in strikingly close to her, Duke Caligo gazes down at Gretel with an affectionate smile, playfully pucking that he would gladly hold a magnificent wedding every single year just to admire her in such a gown. Flustered by his sudden closeness, Gretel nervously urges him to mind his manners, keenly aware of the dressmaker swooning over their intimate exchange right beside them. Leaning down to whisper against her cheek, the Duke reminds her that looking head over heels will make public rumors far more favorable. Yet as his eyes lock onto hers, his voice loses all pretense, softly confessing that beyond their public charade, she is truly breathtaking. Swept up in the genuine intimacy of his words, Gretel blushes softly and offers him her quiet, heartfelt gratitude. Politely requesting a few moments alone with his bride, the Duke prompts the flustered dressmaker to quickly apologize for her intrusion and leave the room. The moment the doorway clears, Gretel lets out a long, heavy sigh of relief and sinks into the comfortable sofa, finally letting her posture relax after the grueling dress fitting. Taking a seat close beside her, the Duke expresses his genuine concern, worried that he has worn her out with endless preparations so close to their wedding date. Gretel giggles softly and shakes her head, reassuring him with a sweet smile that her only fear was burdening him when time before the ceremony is already so brief. Pausing with endearing hesitation, Gretel turns her bright purple eyes directly toward him with warmth and sincerity. She softly admits that despite high society whispering fearsome tales about the ruthless and cold-blooded Duke Esperanza, her own heart knows the truth, that he is, above all else, an exceptionally kind and thoughtful protector who has given her everything. Her tender words strike the Duke with unexpected force, leaving him stunned and utterly speechless. Mistaking his silent shock for offense, a panicked Gretel hastily stammers out an apology, but as he softly assures her it is fine, the Duke rests his hand against his chin in quiet wonder, echoing her words to himself as a profound warmth takes root within his heart. Taking a quiet moment to gather his thoughts, the Duke pauses to adjust his necktie before turning his attention to the lady beside him. With a solemn expression, he softly announces that he has an important update to give her, immediately catching her off guard and breaking the quiet mood. The instant he reveals that he has news regarding La Viella, her eyes widen in heart-stopping shock. The calm she fought to maintain shatters instantly, and she cries out her daughter's name, her voice trembling under the sudden crushing weight of maternal panic. Clinging frantically to him, she desperately bombards him with questions about her daughter's safety and health, terrified that her fragile body has given out. Sensing her rising panic, he gently holds her hand to anchor her emotions, reminding her to stay strong as she tearfully apologizes for losing her composure. Her heart aches as she remembers her daughter's early childhood, recalling just how extraordinarily delicate La Viella had always been. Even mild spring sunshine would exhaust her frail body, and a simple cold breeze would leave her bedridden, with every doctor and remedy standing helpless against her mysterious illness. Tears stream down her cheeks as she remembers how her sweet girl would always force a gentle smile through her suffering, softly promising her mother that she would be all right once she woke up. Recalling her daughter's selflessness during such painful moments only makes her present grief far more overwhelming. She tearfully confesses her dread that being placed in an unfamiliar environment will cause her daughter's illness to deteriorate further. Holding her steady, he gently validates her motherly fear, reassuring her that such panic is completely natural after being separated from her child, while encouraging her not to fear the worst. To ease her lingering fear, the Duke explains that he placed a trusted healer by La Viella's side to safeguard her health. Reassuring her mother that La Viella is remarkably bright, he fondly recalls how the bold child marched in with her back straight, demanding a contract without a moment's hesitation. Deeply moved, Gretel closes her eyes and tearfully thanks him for taking her daughter's words seriously and protecting them both. The Duke gently urges her to remain strong, assuring her that La Viella fought hard to create this chance, and Gretel squeezes his hand in quiet agreement. Wanting to appear convincing to the outside world, Gretel suggests they drop formal titles and asks him to address her simply as Gretel. Offering a warm smile, the Duke invites her to call him Jack in return, officially sealing their new partnership as contract husband and wife. Though slightly embarrassed by their newfound closeness, Gretel finds comfort in knowing her daughter is safe, silently praying for the day they can reunite in good health. Far away at a sunlit rural cottage, La Viella's new life is already unfolding peacefully. Living under the name Ella, she is immediately surrounded by cheerful children begging her to read stories and playhouse. Smiling warmly at their playful demands, she gently calms their excitement and suggests taking turns so no one feels left out. Out in the sunlit garden, Lucian approaches Ella with a polite demeanor, asking if she has a quick moment to speak with him. Turning around in mild surprise, she gazes back at him with wide, bright eyes, warmly offering to help him with whatever he might need. She gently hesitates for a moment, pointing out her earlier promise to spend the afternoon playing house with the local children. Sensing the shift, the cheerful youngsters laughingly assure her that they can play on their own, quickly scampering away and leaving the two of them alone together. Guiding her inside toward the quiet infirmary, Lucian carefully pours a fresh cup of steaming warm tea for her to enjoy. Ella looks down at the fragrant saucer with wide, surprised eyes, deeply touched by his unexpected initiative and thoughtful concern for her delicate health. Sitting together at the wooden table, Lucian admits his worry that staying outside too long might strain her frail body so soon after her recovery. He gently slides the hot tea closer, encouraging her to drink it to boost her immune system, which she happily sips with immense gratitude. Looking across at him with a radiant smile, Ella eagerly reassures him that she has felt remarkably light and full of energy ever since he treated her illness. Expressing her heartfelt thanks for his care, she receives only a quiet, stoic stare from Lucian in return. Hidden behind his calm composure is a troubling reality. His holy power has only temporarily driven out the fatal energy surrounding her. Lucian realizes with heavy solemnity that unless they maintain constant, regular contact, her delicate condition will inevitably deteriorate back to how it originally was. Recognizing the grave responsibility resting on his shoulders, Lucian tightly pulls back his white glove, steadying his inner resolve. He silently accepts that he must remain closely by Laviella's side, keeping her safe from the cruel fate that still looms over her fragile life. To hide the true nature of his holy treatment, Lucian fabricates an excuse about struggling with germophobia, admitting that touching her somehow feels far easier than with anyone else. Removing his white glove and looking up with a soft expression, he gently asks if she would spend time holding hands with him so he can get used to physical touch. Without a second thought, Ella brightens up completely and enthusiastically grasps his bare hand with both of hers, asking with a beaming smile if this is enough to help. Softening at her joyful response, Lucian offers a quiet word of thanks, deeply relieved that his plan to safeguard her health can continue without raising any suspicion. As their hands remain intertwined, Ella is surprised to feel a strange wave of comfort wash over her, noticing how remarkably light and at ease her fragile body feels in his presence. Gazing across the table with a bright, earnest expression, she softly checks if he is feeling okay and promises to hold his hand anytime he needs. Their quiet moment is interrupted when Benjamin strolls into the room with a playful smirk, teasingly questioning why the two of them are holding hands so tightly. Quickly pulling back as Lucian pulls his glove back on, Ella brightly explains that she is simply trying to return the wonderful help Lucian has already given her. Never wanting anyone to feel excluded, Ella warmly turns to Benjamin and promises that she is always ready to help him as well, even if he just needs someone to listen to his worries. Taken completely off guard by her genuine kindness, Benjamin stares back at her with wide, quiet surprise. Before they can say another word, young Sam comes rushing into the infirmary in a sudden, breathless panic, crying out that a severe crisis has just broken out. He urgently warns them that nobles have arrived at the cottage, harassing the director and demanding to find a child to take away with them. Outside, an imposing noblewoman clad in a rich crimson gown looks down with a cold, haughty gaze alongside her smiling companion. Their sudden appearance brings a dark wave of tension to the quiet cottage, threatening the peaceful sanctuary Laviella and the children have built. As Baroness Apolloni and her companions stroll through the orphanage hallway, they casually comment on the well-maintained facilities and healthy children. Yet behind the noblewoman's polished exterior lies a cold, calculating gaze that quietly scrutinizes everything around her. Looking over the orphans with harsh disdain, the noble visitors openly judge their appearances, dismissing one child for being far too skinny and another as completely subpar. When the concerned caretaker nervously intervenes and asks the Baroness to follow proper adoption formalities in her office, her plea for basic order is met with immediate offense. Offended by the mere mention of procedure, the Baroness turns around with sharp indignation. She haughtily reminds the caretaker of the substantial donations they have poured into the facility, threatening to cut off all financial support if she dares to make things difficult for them. Peeking anxiously from behind a wooden doorframe, the children watch the haughty nobles in growing horror. The brown-haired boy bristles with indignation as he realizes they are inspecting orphans as if selecting livestock. Having heard how aristocrats adopt children purely to show off to high society, seeing such callousness in person sickens him. Sensing the mounting danger, the dark-haired boy turns to Ella and quietly instructs her to stay hidden out of sight. He warns that these visitors might be nobles tied directly to the Marquis, causing Ella's eyes to widen in sudden panic as the realization of their precarious situation hits her. The brown-haired boy urgently tries to send Ella away to an empty classroom until the visitors leave. But before she can slip away, a harsh voice singles him out, and a heavy, unyielding hand suddenly grabs his shoulder from behind, cutting off his escape. Swiveling around in terror, the boy stares up at a large nobleman smirking down at him with a chilling, predatory expression. Trapped under the man's tight grip, the boy's green eyes tremble with dread as the true peril of their encounter becomes undeniable. Smirking with cold satisfaction, the Baroness inspects the brown-haired boy like a prized possession and carelessly announces her choice to take him. She tightly seizes his wrist, ignoring his desperate, frantic pleas to let him go as he struggles with all his might against her unyielding grasp. Callously dragging the terrified child along the corridor, the noblewoman forcefully insists he should be grateful for a far more luxurious life at her barony. She haughtily dismisses his stubborn resistance as foolishness, completely deaf to the deep fear and desperation in his voice. The caretaker courageously steps in, sternly reminding the noble visitors that the orphanage will never permit adoptions against a child's free will. Tears spill from the boy's eyes as he cries out in anguish, terrified that being dragged away means he will never see his beloved brother again. Suddenly, a sharp slap echoes loudly through the hallway, stunning everyone into total silence. As the brown-haired boy gasps in disbelief while clutching his face, young Ella steps protectively in front of him, standing tall as a courageous shield between the helpless orphan and the arrogant aristocrats. Clutching her burning cheek in stunned horror, the Baroness boils with intense humiliation that a lowly orphan dared to strike her face. Infuriated, she raises her gloved hand to deliver a harsh blow, yet Ella faces the noblewoman's towering rage head-on without backing down an inch. Without a single tremor in her voice, Ella calmly asks if the Baroness is unfamiliar with imperial law. Looking the noblewoman dead in the eye, she boldly reminds her that forcing an adoption against a child's will is strictly illegal under a decree personally approved by the emperor himself. Fixing the aristocrat with an intensely fierce gaze, Ella stresses that imperial protection applies to all children, even orphans. She subtly cautions that with the high society season right around the corner, a public scandal could prove ruinous, leaving the Baroness visibly startled and thoroughly flustered. Ella maintains a calm, sweet smile as she delivers her sharp warning to the haughty aristocrats. Reminding them that attempting to forcibly abduct an orphan would provoke a ruinous public scandal. Right before the high society season, she brilliantly turns their own social ambitions directly against them. Boiling with humiliation, the Baroness seethes at the unbelievable audacity of an orphan daring to threaten her reputation. Yet with her companion nervously urging a quick retreat to avoid scandal, she reluctantly turns on her heel, storming out of the hallway while bitterly declaring she will return tomorrow. The moment the noble visitors retreat, Ella rushes to Sejiman's side, placing a steadying hand on him and gently asking if he was hurt. Emotionally drained from the harrowing encounter, the boy trembles in silence, clutching his face as the lingering terror of near abduction takes its toll. Seeking refuge in the quiet warmth of the infirmary, Ella sits across from Benjamin to check if he has finally settled down. Offering a faint, grateful smile, Benjamin explains that Lucian excused himself to give them privacy, quietly showing consideration in his own reserved way. Hesitating with a lowered gaze, Benjamin timidly reminds Ella of her past promise to listen whenever he needed advice. Ella's eyes widen with earnest warmth as she immediately reassures him without a single second of hesitation, ready to offer whatever comfort she can. Gathering his courage, Benjamin makes a startling confession that catches Ella completely off guard, revealing that he is not actually an orphan. He admits that he comes from a real family and has a brother of his own, leaving Ella staring at him in breathless shock. Connecting his truth to the panicked cries he made when the Baroness grabbed him, Ella finally understands why losing his brother terrified him so deeply. When she asks how he ended up at the orphanage, Benjamin reveals that he ran away from home, confessing he is an illegitimate child born from his father's affair. Benjamin fondly recalls his early childhood spent living alone with his gentle, loving mother. Whenever he innocently asked when his father would return home, she softly reassured him that he was merely away on business. She filled his young heart with complete trust and warmth, carefully protecting him from the shadow hanging over their peaceful lives. That quiet sanctuary suddenly shattered the day an unexpected knock echoed loudly at their front door. Opening the door hesitantly, Benjamin's mother stood face to face with a dignified noblewoman named Licia Stanford. She had arrived at their home alongside her handsome older son, determined to confront the woman living in her deceitful husband's shadow. Peeking nervously from behind his mother's dress, young Benjamin listened in growing dread as Licia delivered a truly devastating revelation. Their father was living an elaborate double life with a secret wife and family elsewhere, leaving both innocent households utterly betrayed and heartbroken by the very same man's endless web of cruel lies. Instead of harboring bitter resentment toward them, Licia compassionately embraced Benjamin and his mother as true family. Declaring that only their deceitful husband was to blame for the tragedy, she resolved to live well despite him. After the coward vanished forever, all four of them began building a warm, happy life together. Yet their cherished period of happiness proved heartbreakingly brief when Benjamin's mother tragically succumbed to a fatal illness. Though Lady Licia lovingly took the grieving boy into her care and raised him like her own child, she too passed away just 2 years later, leaving the two devoted brothers completely alone in the world. With only his loving older brother left to lean on, Benjamin suffered another devastating blow when his brother was suddenly deployed to the distant battlefield. Forced into the cold, oppressive care of heartless relatives who mistreated him, the frightened boy simply could not endure life without his brother, driving him to run away to the orphanage. Overwhelmed by painful memories, Benjamin breaks down into tears as the heavy weight of loneliness crushes him. Struggling through his desperate sobs, he cries out with a heart full of grief, confessing just how deeply he misses his older brother right now. As the flawless headmaid of House Esperanza, she manages every daily task with absolute perfection. Yet behind her composed exterior lies a quiet, desperate craving for anything cute. When the Duke calls her to entrust a sick child to her care, she catches sight of a precious little girl snuggled tight. She maintains her professional cool while secretly swooning with joy. Stepping softly into the room, she bows politely to introduce herself to the startled youngster. Facing those adorable bunny ears up close becomes the single happiest moment of her career. As headmaid of House Esperanza, she manages ledgers and resolves complaints flawlessly. Yet behind her polished perfection lies a hidden obsession, quietly yearning for something unbearably cute. When the Duke summons her to take care of a fragile child, she accepts with formal composure, but seeing the sleepy little girl up close, her stern exterior instantly melts. After steadying her breath outside the room, she steps inside to greet the timid child with professional courtesy. Gazing at the angel in front of her, she experiences her happiest moment yet.